Good evening and welcome to the City of Oxnard Planning Commission regular meeting for Thursday, July 7th, 2022. A quick housekeeping item, as shown on the agenda and online, please email all written public comments to planning@oxnard.org. Those wishing to speak during the meeting may do so in person or virtually. For in-person speakers, please submit your speaker card to the commission secretary. For virtual speakers, please view the bottom of your screens for the call-in number, meeting ID, and passcode. If you dial in only, you may press *9 to raise or lower your hand. If you are on the desktop Zoom app, you may use the raise hand feature. You may also submit your request to speak by visiting oxnard.org/city-meetings by 3 p.m. the day of the meeting. Because the meeting is electronic, all votes will be done by roll call. And with that, we'll move to our commission secretary to establish our quorum.
Chair Chavez,
Here.
Vice Chair Ovejo,
Here.
Commissioner Connolly,
Here.
Commissioner Meyer,
Here.
Commissioner Nash,
Here.
Commissioner Sanchez, and Commissioner Dr. Lopez is absent, and we have a quorum.
Thank you for that. We'll move to our next item, which is our Pledge of Allegiance. And Commissioner Meyer, would you mind leading us? Thank you for that. At this time, we'll go ahead and proceed to public comments for items not on the agenda. Members wishing to provide public comments for items not on the agenda, but within the subject matter jurisdiction of the Planning Commission may do so at this time. However, the commission cannot take action on any items presented during public comments and will be referred to the commission secretary. All public comment speakers will have 3 minutes. Commission secretary, just to confirm, we did not have anyone sign up for this item.
No.
Thank you. So we'll go ahead and proceed with our agenda at this time. Nothing's listed under the consent. We'll move to our ex parte declarations for public hearing items. Vice Chair Rejo.
None.
Thank you. Commissioner Connolly.
Yes, I had communication with Miss Marta Golding Brown, the Government Affairs Director for the Ventura County Coastal Association of Realtors, specifically in regards to the CAP plan.
Thank you. Commissioner Meyer.
None. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Nash.
Yes, I did have a phone call with Ms. Mallory today going over some of my concerns, but I expect them to be brought up in the meeting tonight. So thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Sanchez.
None. Thank you.
Thank you. And none for myself. So we'll go ahead and continue to our agenda down to item G, which is study sessions and reports. This project name is Study Session on the City of Oxnard Climate Action and Adaptation Plan, known as CAP. City staff is Kathleen Mallory, Planning and Sustainability Manager for the City of Oxnard, and Shannon Wags, Principal Planner for Environmental Science Associates. The recommendation that the Planning Commission receive the presentation from the city's CAP consultant on the draft CAP document and receive public comments on the draft CAP document and provide feedback on the draft CAP document. At this time, we'll move to Ms. Mallory for introductions.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Commission. It's nice to see you this evening. And we're very excited to present this study session to the Commission. It's been a few years coming. We're very proud of this document. We've received a lot of good feedback on it. And so we're going to go ahead as I provide introductory remarks. Shannon, if you wanted to go ahead and share your screen, if that would be the easiest venue for you. So on our meeting this evening, we have Shannon Wages with Environmental Science Associates. We have Brian Schuster as well with Environmental Science Associates. They are our technical leads, as this is a very technical item. And just a reminder, no decision is being made this evening. This is a study session only to have your questions asked, answered, Many of the items I believe will be able to respond, if not all of them. And bear with us if we need to flip through the voluminous document. We also have our esteemed Public Works team on. We have Michael Wolf, who's remote in the event that you have questions that pertain to the Public Works team. And I also wanted to thank Steve Howlett, the Assistant Public Works Director, who's been instrumental with bringing this project forward. And then finally, I have Jose from the Fleet Managers Department. I'm not going to butcher his last name, but he's here should you have some questions on EV. Of course, we have our Community Development Director here, Mr. Vito Automitis, as you know. So that's our team. And with that, I'll just go ahead. And Mr. Roselle, of course, our wonderful Chief City Attorney. So with that, I'm going to go and again, in the interest of Measure M, I'm just going to cover the first 3 slides, which I've done the first already. We have our draft climate action and adaptation plan. We heard what the purpose, you read from the agenda what the purpose is. And really, again, it's the overview of our climate action and adaptation plan. You can see that beautiful artwork, which was a local artist, Manny Burnell. We had a competition and we're very proud of that logo. The goal is to receive public comments on the draft document and then to provide feedback for the commission to provide feedback on the CAP document. And we have had many study session items with our stakeholders as well as the community, and we have that summarized in the document too. Next slide, please. All right. So today, we wanted to provide the frame. We wanted to frame this so that we can get through this document in about 21 slides. We're hopeful that the commission will note the slide. If there's questions, note it and let us proceed through the presentation so that we can hopefully maybe even answer some of your questions that you might have as we go through. We think that's the most expeditious and efficient way to get through the presentation. So we'll go through the CAB objectives. Shannon will. After this slide, I'll turn it over to Shannon to address these items. We'll talk about the relationship between the general plan. We do have the sustainable communities portion of our general plan. We'll talk briefly about the environmental determination, and then we'll go over different CAP components and walk through some of the inventories as well as our vulnerability analysis and adaptations. And then finally, we'll wrap up with an exciting chapter, which is our implementation chapter, which is our personal favorite. Additionally, we'll summarize the community and stakeholder input, and then I'll walk through next steps. And then at that point, we would like to turn it over to the commission and the community to ask the questions. I will also mention that Shannon will let me close up with responding to some of the questions I've received since publication of the packet. So we'll answer some of the commissioner questions we've received. And then I also wanted just to mention that we'll walk through kind of next steps as well. I think I covered that. But with that, Shannon, I'll go ahead and turn that over to you.
Okay, thanks, Kathleen. All right, so the CAP has 2 primary objectives. One is to reduce GHG emissions through the implementation of reduction measures to meet a reduction target consistent with Senate Bill 32, which mandates a statewide reduction of GHG emissions to 40% below 1990 levels by 2030. And the second is to enhance the community's resilience to a changing climate by addressing the vulnerabilities and risks that are expected to occur as a result of those impacts. The CAP is consistent with and supports general plan goals and policies. Specifically, it implements policy SC-1.2 of the sustainable community element, which directs the city to continue to monitor and support efforts of the California Air Resources Board, or CARB, and other agencies as they formulate global warming and climate change adaptation and mitigation strategies and programs. And secondly, SC-1.3, which directs the city to develop a CAP that implements the requirements of CARB and or the Ventura County Air Pollution Control District, that establishes a GHG emissions threshold of significance, sets GHG reduction targets, and supports the regional SB 375 sustainable community strategy. And it's important, I think, to mention that the city will be updating its general plan starting in early 2023, which will further the implementation of this cap. So the structure, the cap has an extensive executive summary and 5 chapters, as well as 6 supporting appendices that provide information used to develop the cap as listed here. And I'll be walking through the major components of the cap chapters in the subsequent slides. The 6 appendices contain details on public engagement efforts in Appendix A, major climate change policies and regulations in the state of California in Appendix B. Appendix C includes the assumptions and methods used to quantify the GHG inventory and emissions reduction estimates that are presented in Chapter 2 and 3 of the cap. Appendix D includes the methods used to develop the socioeconomic vulnerability index. E contains a list of partnering organizations for implementing the cap. And lastly, Appendix F provides descriptions of potential funding sources to support cap implementation. We did receive a comment from a commissioner that I thought I would just touch on now related to Table C2 in Appendix C of the cap. Since we're talking about appendices, I thought I would just pause to answer that comment. The comment asked about the accuracy of the employment projections for 2050, which showed a figure of 142,030. And I'm assuming the commissioner felt this was high as it jumped 59% in 20 years. So the 2050 number is linearly interpolated from the Ventura County Transportation Model's values from 2012 and 2040, as provided by our transportation consultants, Fair and Peers. They received data from the Ventura County Transportation Commission and interpolated it from there. Since it's so far out, we don't think that this figure is very relevant to the cap, but we did want to just address that comment. So the cap is considered a qualified GHG reduction plan because it aligns with state targets and has undergone its own environmental review consistent with the California Environmental Quality Act, or CEQA. The nice thing about a qualified cap is that it can be used to facilitate CEQA clearance of the city's future development projects with respect to GHG emissions. And it's proving to be the most effective and legally defensible way to plan for growth that does not create a significant impact with respect to GHG emissions. The CAP environmental document will be included in the hearing packets for the Planning Commission hearing, so you will be able to review that document in detail soon. So Chapter 2 of the CAP provides an understanding of where the city's GHG emissions are coming from. In 2020, the city completed an inventory of emissions for the year 2010, which represents the earliest year for which the necessary data was available, and for the year 2018, which represents the most recent year for which data was available. So these pie charts on this slide show the 2018 inventory. The left shows community emissions and the right municipal emissions. Community emissions are comprised of emissions from activities occurring within the city, including emissions that occur elsewhere because of those activities. So a good example that we had in the CAP is solid waste, which is generated locally but disposed of at a landfill outside the city, where it decomposes and generates GHGs. And the city's municipal emissions inventory represents GHGs that occur due to city operations. They represent sources over which the city has the most control. As you can see, the transportation is the largest contributor to community emissions, followed by electricity use, natural gas use, and solid waste, which together make up about 95% of total emissions. For municipal emissions, electricity is the largest contributor, followed by the on-road fleet, wastewater treatment, solid waste, water treatment, and natural gas, which make up 94% of the total emissions. We did receive a comment from a commissioner related to the graph on page 6 of 15 of the staff report, asking whether the 19% shown as natural gas emissions, and this is the one on the left, refers to non-electricity generation, and that is correct. The 19% is from natural gas used in buildings, so water heating, space heating, cooking, etc., not from electricity generation. And the natural gas data is provided by SoCalGas. Electricity emissions are a separate source. So chapter 3 of the CAP presents the GHG reduction strategies. There are 14 strategies organized under 7 categories as shown on this slide. The community and stakeholder input informed the strategies in the CAP. For example, the clean energy strategies reflect recommendations that the city expand rooftop solar throughout the community and on municipal buildings, increase local energy storage and the use of microgrids to optimize the effectiveness of clean energy systems, and increase resilience during power outages. Not shown on this slide are the 85 actions, which are divided between community actions and municipal actions under each strategy. And I'll just respond to a few comments that we received from a commissioner related to the GHG reduction strategies. We received a comment related to the transportation T1 strategies to expand zero emissions vehicle charging and fueling infrastructure. This starts on page 3-21 of the CAP. The comment says to require EV chargers to be placed next to handicapped spaces. And this is actually already a requirement per the building code. Another comment from a commissioner relates to the same section on page 3-22 of the CAP. And the comment says that forthcoming EV options will include V2G capacity, which enables grid users to use electricity drawn from EV batteries during times of increased demand or grid outages, and that this should be quantified. And our response is that this is currently difficult to quantify given the current state of V2G technology and its limited use, but the Zero Electric Vehicle Master Plan will explore this as a strategy. A similar comment for the same section suggests an action for municipal EVs that they all be V2G capable. And staff's response is that this should also be handled as part of recommendations of the ZEV Master Plan. Okay, so as the CAP demonstrates, more than half of the greenhouse gas reductions needed for the city to reach its 2030 target are expected to come from clean energy strategies, and about a quarter will come from waste reduction and recycling, followed by green building strategies as third. So additional reductions are expected from transportation, land use, and water conservation. You might be wondering, why, if so much community emissions are coming from transportation, why are only 4% of reductions coming from transportation? So the strategies developed for the CAP really build on the efforts the city is already making and leverages those efforts. So it's easy to achieve most of your reductions in the energy sector. And because of your partnership with CPA and your energy action plan, the things that you're already doing, it is difficult to reduce vehicle miles traveled, which is the source of transportation emissions. Certainly shifting to electric vehicles more and more in the future will make a difference. There are also a number of ways transportation miles can be reduced. These include land use policy decisions, analysis of vehicle miles traveled associated with development projects and the city's housing element. And the CAP acknowledges, what else is happening in the city as well to address transportation, such as the city's sustainable transportation plan and the upcoming comprehensive general plan update. So measures there will relate to reducing transportation emissions further. Chapter 4 of the CAP is the chapter devoted to climate vulnerability and adaptation strategies. So it provides an in-depth look at the climate change impacts and adaptation strategies for extreme heat events, extreme drought, smoke and air pollution, sea level rise, extreme storms, and stormwater flooding. For each of these 5 hazard areas, there are sections in Chapter 4 on how the hazard is expected to develop or become worse over time with climate change, a discussion of the anticipated impacts and vulnerabilities associated with the hazard, and a description of what the city and the community can do to adapt and improve resilience to the hazard. And it is important to note that the city is in the early stages of adaptation planning, and just as importantly, in the early stages of identifying how adaptation strategies can be funded. You will see that the resilience and adaptation strategies in Chapter 4 are not as fully developed as the GHG reduction strategies in Chapter 3 in terms of identifying specific programs or city actions that need to be taken. Future decisions will need to be made about that, about what the city can do and will do. On that note, comment number 48 in attachment D of the staff report provides some best practices to ensure a robust implementation of the CAP. And one of those best practices was to consider creating an interdepartmental CAP task force and integrating the CAP as part of the city's annual budgeting process, which city staff supports, and we have as a result recommended editing the CAP with those recommendations. And that task force and CIP integration would also advance climate adaptation strategies as well. We also received a couple comments from a commissioner related to adaptation strategies. One is about strategies CP3 on page 4-9 of the CAP on the topic of community preparedness. And the comment said that EVs, especially municipal vehicles, should be required to provide energy or to provide emergency battery storage and energy supplies for sensitive populations. I think we would need more specifics from the commissioner as to a recommended action, but the ZEV master plan would certainly explore this as well. Another comment is from page 4-14 of the CAP, where it says under negative factors, the table on the right, that approximately 520 public housing units lack air conditioning and backup generators, which can impact elderly, disabled, and mobility impaired tenants. I'm not sure what the comment is asking about regarding this issue, but there are 520, I think, senior housing units and under that are maintained by the city. And we do have a strategy under EH2, under extreme heat, that does focus on securing funding to make upgrades for low-income households to combat extreme weather. Certainly the planning commissioner can make further recommendations for this strategy. So chapter 5 describes the steps the city will be taking to implement the CAP, which includes identifying funding sources and partnering organizations, conducting additional financial impact analyses where needed for the city's budgeting process, and continuing with community outreach and engagement as the CAP is implemented. And as mentioned, implementation of the CAP will be part of the CIP and annual budgeting process. And the CAP will also be updated every 5 years to adjust to shifting priorities and take advantage of new funding opportunities. This slide shows the timeframes for the GHG reduction strategies and the adaptation strategies, which are aligned with the CIP. So for the GHG reduction strategies, in order to align with the CIP planning and budgeting process, we have changed the short term to be from 2022 to 2026, the midterm from 2026 to 2030, and the long term from 2030 to 2035. And right now, all GHG reduction strategies are scheduled for near-term and midterm implementation. There are no changes to the adaptation strategy timeframes. These strategies extend beyond 2030 because they are not tied to any state mandates, but also fall into the near and midterm times, with 4 or so strategies in the long term. And those timeframes can certainly be revisited when the CAP gets updated. The city staff worked with the city's public works department to ensure that, that the timeframes work and they're realistic. And of course, city council prioritization will need to occur as part of the city's yearly budgeting and CIP approval process. There are 2 tables in chapter 5 that provide implementation details, one for GHG reduction strategies and one for resilience and adaptation strategies. This slide shows the implementation table for the GHG actions and strategies. They both provide a time frame for implementation and identify the city department responsible for each implementation action. They also identify potential partners and known funding sources. More detail about partnering organizations can be found in Appendix E, while Appendix F provides information about current federal, state, and regional funding sources. Let's see. And this table is the adaptation strategies table, which is, you can see, formatted the same as the GHG reduction strategy table. Okay, so certain strategies and actions in chapter 5 are considered policy level items. These are listed in attachment B of the staff report and relate to these topics listed. So procuring clean energy, green building infrastructure, waste reduction and recycling, transportation, land use, and water conservation. These strategies and actions are essential to achieving GHG reduction goals and will impact city budgets and operations. We can delve into any of these in our discussion if desired. after the presentation. This slide shows the extensive community and stakeholder engagement that we conducted over the course of the CAP development. So this process started in March of 2021 when the City Council selected the reduction target consistent with SB 32. We started engagement activities back in May of 2021 with a community survey that received 133 responses. We also held 12 meetings with various stakeholder groups over the course of the project. And the city hosted 2 public workshops in May of 2021, conducted in both English and Spanish, and then another public meeting on the draft cap in May of 2022 to take comments and questions on the draft cap. And in general, input from the community, has expressed strong support for strategies that prioritize and protect populations who are most vulnerable to climate change and consider those who don't have the financial means to invest in solutions like rooftop solar or EVs, strategies that benefit the entire community and not just certain segments of the population or business community, strategies that are cost effective and economically feasible. And there is support for ongoing education and collaboration with the community as the plan gets implemented. And during the 43-day public review period, the City Council received 9 comment letters. All of the comments are provided in attachment D of the staff report. Staff has summarized the comments and provided detailed responses to these comments. Further, attachment D provides input on how the comments were addressed and identifies where the comment resulted in changes to the CAP document. And in many instances, input resulted in additional language refinement and clarification. A number of commenters expressed support for electrification and new construction earlier than mandated by California code requirements. And city staff's response to that is that it enforces the requirements of California's building energy efficiency standards, so Title 24, and will require new home construction to be electric ready effective January 1st of 2023. At the same time, the city also sees the need to retain natural gas as a reliable energy source until adequate local energy storage capacity is developed to ensure that the city's population is not put at risk during emergencies and power outages. Another comment indicated that details on the cost and precise timing associated with programs and measures should be provided. The city's response is that a detailed fiscal analysis would occur after council adopts the CAP and in conjunction with near-term projects to ensure estimates are realistic and align with the city's 2-year CIP process. Another comment suggested that the city set more ambitious GHG emission targets and stronger GHG reduction goals, such as 50 to 60% reduction by 2030 and carbon neutrality by 2035. The city's response is that, being that this is the city's very first CAP, the city is taking an important step in doing its fair share to reduce global GHG emissions and has set a feasible target that the city can realistically achieve for 2030 while putting the city on a path to achieving deeper reductions consistent with the state's long-term goals. And certainly during the next CAP update, the city could set an even more ambitious goal as necessary and feasible. Finally, another comment said that the CAP should contain more information regarding measures to improve pedestrian, bikes, transportation, and micro-mobility solutions. As mentioned already, the city's sustainable transportation planning grants will produce a plan incorporating complete streets design, safe routes to school, Vision Zero, and first last mile planning in tandem with land use opportunities, plans, and existing conditions. And the city also recognizes that through the 2050 general plan update, which will kick off in 2023, land use patterns and alternatives will be robustly evaluated. All right, so this just shows the next steps to get the CAP through to adoption. On July 21st of this month, the Planning Commission will hold a hearing to adopt a resolution recommending City Council approval of the CAP. On September 27th, there will be a City Committee review of the CAP inclusive of revision pages. On October 18th, the City Council will hold a hearing to adopt a resolution approving the CAP, including the revision pages. And then finally, once adopted, the consultant team will produce a final CAP incorporating resolutions and revision pages, and the city will post the final CAP on the CAP website. So that concludes our presentation, and now we will be happy to take any questions or comments.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to step in and respond to some of the input we've received to date. Thank you, Shannon, for that thorough and excellent presentation. There's a few items. We received an email where there were 5 items identified. This was an email from July 6th. I believe Shannon has hit 2 of the items and addressed them this evening. We also had a suggested modification and there were 5 items. Shannon addressed 2 of them. And then there were 2 typos identified in the staff report, and we do our best to be thorough and professional. And I think it's a win with just 2, but ideally we shoot for 0. So thank you for that. Additionally, there's 2 other changes that are recommended. And one would be page 4-3 to change a text in that second paragraph from homeless to unhoused. We have no concerns with doing that. And again, that modification would be reflected in changes that would be recommended by the Planning Commission. And I'll talk about that in a moment. Additionally, there is some text under page 4-32. With that, there's a word that needs to be inserted, which is high after particularly. So particularly high. And that is on page 4-32, and I can get into context on that if you would like a little more. And we have no concerns with that modification as well. So those are the 2 modifications to the cap that were discussed. Before I get into responding on a couple questions on VMT as well as our exciting CPA program, what we're recommending is that the resolution that we intend to bring to the Planning Commission on the 21st. It would be a resolution recommending approval to the council of the cap. And within that, attached to that resolution, we would recommend a page that includes what your recommended changes to the cap would be. That will save us, that's for a few reasons. One is no confusion on different versions of the cap out for the public. Secondly, we believe it clearly it provides clarity on the revisions that the commission would like to make, of which would be the 2 that I just mentioned that we know of thus far. Additionally, we have for production reasons, the third reason is it saves money for our for the city if we go back through and make these edits and then we bring it to council. We're trying to be conservative of fiscal resources. So that's why we mentioned we'll bring forward the draft cap as you see it here this evening with errata pages as we showed within attachment D, which are the changes we've reviewed and we know based upon working with the community and then the additional revisions that the commission would recommend and attach to your resolution. So that's our envisioned approach. In terms of the issue of vehicle miles traveled, we also received an email today from a commissioner asking about VMT, and it's one of my favorite topics, vehicle miles traveled. So back in July of 2020, the state actually changed the metric, as we call it, for environmental analysis. And now the standard to look at transportation impacts is vehicle miles traveled versus level of service. Now, we still do need to look at level of service, or LOS as we call it, and that's for general plan conformance. We've been working on this VMT issue for quite some time. And one of the important things to note is that the most effective mitigation for reducing VMT is pedestrian bicycle transit network improvements, as well as a mix of land uses and providing affordable housing near places of work. So this is truly an issue that is near and dear to us. And I feel very happy for the city that we're in the middle of all of those issues with a robust and detailed housing element. And then, as Shannon mentioned, the work that we're going to be doing with our 2050 Oxnard General Plan update. We also have been working on determining what the best approach is for Oxnard to address the VMT issue. We'll be bringing this issue before the Planning Commission for a study session later this year, with the ultimate goal then of incorporating the standard of how we're addressing VMT for development projects, and including that within our CEQA guidelines, and ultimately it will be something that goes to council. But when we bring it to the Planning Commission, because it is such an important topic, we'll be having a study session here similar to this. And that will be open for the community and the developers and anybody who has an interest in this important topic. There was also a question raised regarding the Power Share program and Power Ready, and we are actively involved in that program. So the Power Share program, it provides for discounts to disadvantaged communities and allows community organizations, businesses, and those within disadvantaged areas to take advantage of clean energy. And applicants within established disadvantaged communities, or DACs, have the opportunity then to take advantage of local renewable sources. What that means is that clean energy would be generated within those DAC areas, and then businesses or residences would take advantage of that local renewable energy. It's a fantastic program. We have been working with identified property owners in that area. We actually did give a GIS-based map to the CPA. That's additional information that I wanted to share. And then we facilitated the long-range planning and sustainability team facilitated a virtual meeting with interested solar developers and large property owners in those DACs. So and I will just say Oxnard has been one of the only cities that's been leading the charge with social media promotions. We actually got a shout out at the recent CPA board meeting for specifically what Oxnard's doing. So just appreciate the work of the team in doing that. So the Power Share program is actively recommended in the CAP, and we are doing it. And you see actually a program within the draft CAP encouraging the continuity or the continuation of that program. And that's program E1-3 on page 3-9 if you're interested. Additionally, there was a question about the Power Ready program. That is a program that is also offered by the Clean Power Alliance. And what that does is it provides for one resilient battery and energy storage facility within each Clean Power Alliance member agency. So what the idea is that it's in the event that there's a natural disaster or the grid goes down for whatever reason, there's a facility where the city can have energy and have the ability to operate generators, and it's free of charge. So you may have recently seen, we took an item to council to sign an MOU with the CPA. So when we were looking at different facilities, we looked at a number of different facilities in the city. You have to take into consideration usage, so it has to make sense. There has to be enough usage on the building to offset the cost, and the usage meaning how many people are in the building, how is it a 24/7 building? You also have to take into consideration the health of the building. Is it an old building? Is the roof new? Things of that nature. So we looked at a few different facilities in cooperation with the Public Works facilities team. We ultimately landed on the service center, and we think that's a good choice for a few reasons. One is it gives the opportunity in the event that the system, we have a natural disaster, we have access real time to look at utility records, building records, gas lines, things of that nature. So it makes just a whole lot of sense. So there was a question about that program. How do we come up with the location where we're going forward with that? And the status on that is we will be entering into an MOU with the CPA, and then ultimately the battery and solar system will be installed on the service center roof and in the parking lot for battery storage. And no cost to the city at all. And each city gets one. Of course, we push for two. And so we'll see how that goes. There was a number of questions about EV. We also I believe we responded to that question. But if, really, we fully believe in the EV program, and that's one of our very first CAP implementation measures is in the EV master plan. And that's something that we're going to be pushing for with the Public Works team to get funding to manage that creation of an EV master plan. We're aware there's a number of EV master plans for Ventura County. There are two that one is sort of a drop your pin here, tell us where you want it. And we monitor that. We will take that into consideration. There's also the Ventura County Blueprint, EV Blueprint Accelerator Plan. Just so you know, it has some good ideas. We were not involved in developing that. We have some things we don't think make sense there. And also technologies have changed, as have some patterns, right? Commuting patterns and ways that people are moving about have really changed since that plan was put together. So I wanted to call those two plans out, which are good and will help inform what we do. But ultimately, we want our own plan. There was I believe that are all the items that I wanted to address right now. And with that, I think we will just turn it over back to you, Chair, and we're happy to answer any of your questions tonight.
Thank you, Ms. Mallory, and thank you, Ms. Wages, for the presentation and the addressing those questions and comments. I'll turn it to the commissioners if they have any questions for either our consultant or Ms. Mallory for this item. Commissioner Connolly, followed by Commissioner Meyer.
I had a question, and I wrote fast, so I kind of wanted it for clarification. I believe it was said that the financial analysis was going to come after council approval. So we don't know like the exact what this is going to cost individuals or businesses or people as a whole. Is that correct?
Shannon, I can take that. Thank you, Chair Connolly. Yes, what our recommendation is with the EV master plan, one of the near-term recommendations is to do a costing and a fiscal analysis of the costs associated with the near-term efforts and near-term projects. Really, that's because things are changing so quickly in terms of the economy. And also, if we did pay for a fiscal impact analysis of these measures, couple things. One, this cap would have been over $1 million. One, two, when we would cost out these programs, we're not sure that these ultimately will be where the council lands, right? These are our recommendations, but those are the thoughts with that and also some of this is just the timeframes for moving this forward. So those are the three reasons why it wasn't included. And it's not common. The fourth is it's not common to cost it out as part of the actual CAP document. It's really a policy document and a guiding document.
Perfect. Thank you for the clarification.
Commissioner Meyer.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, some thoughts about first some of the recommendations from the professor from Oxnard College, particularly around I guess stronger, more impassioned language while still staying within what is scientifically sound to state and support. I found those arguments compelling in terms of making this something where people see it's now, it's not coming up. It's not something that we're just planning for in the future. We're in it and it's getting worse. And so the sense of urgency that people would look at this and see, that would be something that I definitely would support. I'm hesitant to, suggest things that are the last 2 weeks before we come up for final, recommendation to the council. But if it can be looked at with an eye in that manner, and then also with an eye in how might we reduce unnecessary jargon to make it a little more user-friendly for the public. And perhaps to have some sort of summary that could be just a couple or a few pages, perhaps, that members of the public who aren't so technically minded might be able to find more accessible. This is kind of like the summary of what we're about in the simplest possible language. So obviously I'm asking a lot here, but these are some things that I think could be helpful. I was curious about the status of the power plant decommissioning and how that fits into this. So maybe I could stop there, and Ms. Mallory, if you could respond to that.
I'd like to respond to all three of your items. I don't mean to put you on the spot. Are you comfortable on the last item? So let me cover the first two items first. So it would be helpful as a commission if you can look at the comments from Jim Danza. I know him very well. And maybe just look at there. You can use attachment D. It would be the comment 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 20, well, it's 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26, 27. So if you have some specific, well, it keeps going. I thought there was just a few, but so we can also, we can look through, but if there's something that resonates with you specifically, it would be helpful on that. Second, the unnecessary jargon. So our CAP includes an executive summary section. I wanted to make sure the commission was aware of that. That's on the ES section at the very beginning. And then I wanted to, and it may take me a minute, but I wanted to also point out, we are really happy at one of the chapters that is addressing, I believe, Commissioner Meyer, some of the questions you raised about how do we make this like more user-friendly or less jargon. We do have an acronym section of the CAP. And then there is a section about what can you do? And that's the section I'm looking for. Maybe as I'm speaking, maybe Shannon, you can look at what section that is and page number and share that with the commission. But we're excited about that because we see that as an opportunity for schools or I recently spoke at a Girl Scout troop and they were asking me about how can you reduce your footprint and, what opportunities are there for you as a local resident to really stay engaged and really care about what you're doing from composting to, walking more. So there's a section on what you can do. I just wanted to, that may not fully address your comment, but I wanted to make sure that I at least raised that with you. Shannon, do you happen to know the page number or the chapter?
Yep, 5-2 and 5-3. It's what the community can do to help. And there's a table 5-1 that lists specific actions under each sector. So, 6 things under clean energy that the community can do. And we give like an estimated annual savings. So it's sort of an incentive for them to do their part in participating in this effort.
Thank you. Ken, did you want to respond on the decommissioning?
Yes, happy to discuss that. I'm part of the city team that has been working with GenOn. As you recall, the city and GenOn entered into an agreement regarding the eventual decommissioning of the Ormond Beach power plant. GenOn has been putting $7.5 million a year they will put over $20 million toward the decommissioning that was scheduled for next year. As you may have heard, Governor Newsom got a bill passed in the last couple of weeks on grid reliability. So he is extending out, of course, with the state legislature agreeing, the life of, I believe, the Diablo Canyon nuclear power plant, as well as some of the gas powered power plants, which include the one in Oxnard. So we don't know exactly how much longer they're going to be extended out, but that will be happening. I can tell you, though, as part of our negotiations with GenOn, at such time as the plant is decommissioned, they're interested in doing a battery storage facility on site because the large power grid, ends and starts there. So that would really help reliability within our community. So that's something, and it would be a very large one. But the good news is that once that was approved, that would mean that the power plant was demolished and there would be more open space available and built into kind of the Ormond Beach restoration plan. So we think this is a win-win for the city and the residents. This does, of course, need to go through various entitlements, environmental review, but I think in the long term, it would be a much better use of that site and would, once again, it would be nice to have, just all open space, but given that the issue we're discussing tonight, having a large battery storage facility that would be there for 20 really help our reliability here within Oxnard.
Great, thank you, Council. So that's in reference to the Mandalay generating station, is that correct?
Mandalay has already been decommissioned. They have actually given up their right for the turbine, which has the ones through cooling. That of course historically pulled water from the Edison Canal, but that has been decommissioned. It's been sold. So GenOn does not own that anymore. It's now owned by a developer who wants to build something on the site to be determined. So that power plant is gone as far as its ability to generate power. That is truly decommissioned, whereas the Ormond Beach is the one that I was referring to.
Perfect. Yeah, I wasn't sure which name applied to which plant. So Ormond Beach is the one that will be extended out, and we don't know quite how long yet, but eventually it would be, there's funds and plans to deconstruct it. Whereas we're not sure what's going to happen with the Mandalay plant in terms of what's coming next for that, but the funds weren't necessarily in place. Is that correct? To deconstruct?
That is correct. As part of the city's discussion with GenOn and support for short-term extension of the life of the Ormond Beach facility, the funds were put in an escrow account held by a third party to ensure that money would be available to help with the decommissioning of that power plant. But unfortunately, there is nothing comparable for Mandalay power plant and a number of those other type of power plants throughout California. So we feel fortunate that we have at this point, I believe it's over $15 million in an escrow account to assist with the eventual decommissioning of the Ormond Beach site. So that would be at least one of two would have a timeline that we'll know quite soon when that would be decommissioned and the visual eyesore on our coast would be removed.
Thank you, Council. Yeah, and I see the executive summary. I guess I was thinking there might be more of a summary that would include, say, each of the different icons of the different types of areas we're working to make changes in, with a little paragraph of what the focus of the plan is on that. So something beyond just like the paragraph or two there. And then I'm wondering that nice piece on 5-2 and after, could that be like maybe duplicated towards the front as well? So it's like people who just want to get to the quick and dirty of it could see that, and then if they want to dig in deeper, then they could go through this. But if they got to get to, page 137 of the plan to get to, what can I do? They might not get there. Us average folks.
We hear your comment. I'll talk with the consultant about that. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Let's see. Beyond that, I have been hearing and then reading a little bit about, I guess, offshore wind being a possibility, but is that more actually for counties north of us, or does that impact our plans, or is it just too speculative at this point to include in analysis?
All of that.
Okay. Thank you. All my questions for now.
Thank you. Any additional commissioners? Vice Chair Rejo.
Thank you, Chair Chavez. I had at least one question follow up in the presentation, and just to give a preview, I'm going to ask about the comments number 4, 7, 19, 36, 46, 62, and 75. But just as a follow up, one of my fellow commissioners asked in regards to funding, and it got me to thinking, has the city allocated any funding specifically for anything that might be modified, changed, updated in the cap?
No, Commissioner Orejo, one of the reasons we're recommending a change in near term is because of the adoption of the 2-year CIP. So we're recommending that doesn't affect our ability to reduce to meet the 2030 emission reduction targets. But that's why we're pushing that back by a year so that it aligns better with the CIP budgeting process.
And as a quick follow-up, can a recommendation be made that some percentage of the budget go towards implementation of CAP? I only ask because sometimes when policies are made, there is some money or cost in regards to implementing them. And I'm a little bit concerned that if there's no funding available at all, that it's going to be a little bit harder or more difficult to actually implement them. So that's my comment on that. Now I'll go to some of the public comments that really reached out to me. I had a little bit more, but I saw that since there were others, I just wanted to highlight them at least a little bit more. In regards to public comment number 4, in regards to heat, I see that some cities and counties are having a heat mitigation officer or something like that. Do we plan because the city is the largest in the county, to have someone designated like that? Or is it already sufficient what being happened in the department or what plans to be?
Thank you, Commissioner Arejo, Chair. First, we do have a recommendation for sustainability analyst. We recognize that to make this CAP fully live and move forward and be a successful document, that we do need that staff position. Second, I wanted to respond on your comment about, can the commission make a recommendation that a specific amount of the budget be earmarked for the CAP? That's certainly a recommendation that the commission can make, and that could be attached to the resolution. That's, I believe that responds to your second question. I would also ask, if you wouldn't mind, Commissioner, because we have our team on, if you could say the numbers so that they can start working on that as I'm answering. I heard 4, 7, 19, 36.
And sorry, I went out of order. I just went in my comments, how I wrote it. 4, 7, 19, 36, 46, and 62. And again, I started off with 75, but I'll go in numerical order now. In regards to number 4, in regards to train, I know that as a city, I can't imagine that we would have as much impact if we wanted in regards to updating or changing schedules. Is there a plan in regards to lobbying the state or the federal government to get those resources and planning, and should they be put into the CAP?
So first, I wanted to make sure I'm on your comment. This is the one regarding T4, section T4. This is comment number 4. Do I have that correct?
Correct.
Excellent. And so speeding up bus routes, this has been an interesting, there is recommended revisions to the text. So a couple of things. These are one of my exciting, I love this topic because it really does relate to our housing element update, right? As part of that, we have a high quality transit corridor. There was a lot of members of the public that just thought we could change that headway time. That's the frequency of the bus. And there was questions on, well, why can't we just speed that up? Why can't you just make it not 15 minutes? Why don't you just make it 12? Or a lot of exciting things happen when you get 15 minutes or less in headway. We're not there. We're not at 15 minutes. And we won't be close to the 15-minute headway timeframe along that high quality transit corridor, which is from the 101 down Oxnard Boulevard to roughly Saviors, Channel Islands, roughly that area, until close to 2028, 2029. So we like the idea of collaboration with Gold Coast Transit. We believe this text that we're recommending under column H makes sense, and we already do it. We had to do it as part of our housing element. We're doing it as part of our high quality transit corridor study. So that's why we're recommending the language, which is to collaborate and mention that in revision language in that section.
Thank you very much. moving on to number 7 in regards to the promotion of gray water. I assume that's in whatever the public right of way is in terms of landscaping. That's how I usually see it. And my comment is that that I think the city should do a better job in regarding publicizing where they do gray water. I know that in other cities or even other private companies, when they water with gray water, they kind of like to let the public know that they have been doing that. So I don't know if the city currently does that, but that would be just my recommendation.
So 2 items on that, Commissioner Arejo. And I don't know if Michael is able to chime in, but this is a comment that actually was intended to be an internal comment with the County of Ventura and their sustainability officer. So we weren't intending to make a change on that. But what I hear you as with a different question, which is, can we make reference to gray water and encouraging that when it is feasible? We do, by law, we're required to sign that purple pipe, don't drink. So we do that right now by law in terms of posting signs. And Michael, I don't know if you have any other items or any other information, or Steve, if you wanted to chime up further.
Good evening. Am I being heard? Just double checking because I'm remote right now.
Yes, we hear you.
Okay, thank you. I just want to clarify something. So the comment was about gray water, which is different than recycled water. So is the question about gray water like the reuse of laundry water from a house, or is the question about recycled water that we produce at AWPF?
I'll expand my question to include both then.
Okay, so as Kathleen mentioned, we do have our advanced water purification facility, AWPF, that produces recycled water that gets produced and purchased. And sometimes when the golf course needs it, they can take it. So we do have like that would be the purple pipe distribution that Kathleen talked about. The gray water is a different process, and I think I see Vito in the audience there, or at least next to Kathleen. The gray water is more about a building process, and that would be taking like your laundry water or your sink water or your shower water and then using that to irrigate. So those are two different separate issues, and the gray water is certainly something that individual property owners can do. The city does produce and use and distribute, sell recycled water.
Thank you very much. That's all for me on comment number 7. Moving to 19, really just a comment on that public comment that I believe that people are going to be using bike lanes more if they're protected. There's been a couple of deaths because of the lack of biking infrastructure in the city, which is quite sad. And so I remember I used to bike a lot around Oxnard College, but there was a lot less traffic circulation there. And now that it's all busy, I don't know if I would recommend that to other people who are in the area. So that's not necessarily for CAP, maybe, but I believe that the protection of the bike lanes and pedestrian areas where there's lacking would probably go towards the policy of reducing VMTs in general. In regards to comment 36, I believe one of my fellow commissioners said this during a previous meeting in regards to mandating PLAs. And this one, I definitely do agree in terms of the reducing the vehicle miles traveled. And a side question to council is that if we wanted to make a recommendation, I know that actions are not supposed to be said. Should we say them now, or should we wait 2 weeks until the resolution is before us to make amendments?
Commissioner Rejo, we were happy to take your language this evening. We can understand the concepts and then incorporate it, and it would actually be useful to have language tonight if that's regarding item 36.
Yes, it is. Honestly, I would be I would be fine with what well, it's in the public record that Commissioner Nash said about having the PLAs already, city councils already going to discuss it. I don't know if they have already, but I believe that it's discussed in terms of economic and quality of life, and now it can be on a climate. And I at least want to vote on that and go from there. So that's my comment. I'm not sure where I want to go with that, but I'm going to wait till my fellow commissioners say something more about that. And the last two, for number 46, I really like the wayfinding signage. I hope we can incorporate it with Port Wainemis too. I'm sure there's some type of collaboration with the county in regards to making that happen. And then in regards to 62, I agree that that although we're doing this because of state legislation and to meet those goals, I don't think it'd be out of our, obviously, I don't think it'd be out of our purview to go for those more aspirational goals that are commented in. I see the state goals as kind of like a baseline, and it's up to the cities, and especially as the largest city in the county, that we could be a leader in this. And so I think I would be in favor of a recommendation to set better, more stricter limits for the city of Oxnard. I guess that's more of a comment. So that's all the questions that I have for now, Chair Chavez. Thank you.
Thank you. Any additional commissioners? Commissioner Sanchez.
Thank you, Chair. So reading all this and what have you, a lot of good things in this, obviously, a lot of good things. My concern is the downtown area, and then the high, and there's so much that could possibly happen there, obviously over time, that because there's a lot of empty buildings and what have you, and you know, it's not really generating anything, either housing or retail or something else. And that's one of my concerns that I see, because you know, can you imagine if you can put some housing in there, in actually in downtown and also Oxnard Boulevard, where you could just revitalize that area, and perhaps we could help to have people have shorter commutes because they can possibly get an apartment or buy a condo or something else if we could revitalize areas like that, especially like the downtown. That's one of my concerns. Thank you.
Thank you. Any additional questions? Commissioner Nash.
Thank you, Chair Chavez, and thank you to my other commissioners. We've had some great comments. I think that after this portion of our deliberation, as we wrap things up, that we could all then give our recommendations that we would want to present before the city council, so that we can, you know, present a tidy document to the planning staff. I know that my comments were kind of all over the place, and I apologize for that. It's a really complicated document, and I admit to getting confused on some of the terminology myself. I do have a question for Shannon. If we can go back to slide 11, and I want to clear something up here.
Sure. You want me to share my screen?
Yes, please.
Okay. Hold on. Okay, which slide would you like to see? Can you see the main screen?
11.
Okay, slide 11. Okay,
And I talked with Kathleen about this this morning, that there was some doubt as to whether or not Oxnard was susceptible to wildland fires. And I just made the comment, my own personal anecdote here, that during the Thomas fire, and I live up by the golf course, and we were able to watch the fire race down the hills. And I was very concerned that the fire would come down the Santa Clara River bed, and that would present a pathway directly into the heart of Oxnard. So I do think I do think that because we have that wildland urban interface, that Oxnard is susceptible to wildfires, and I would just like to have that included as a major climate change hazard. So that was my comment on slide 11.
okay.
And that-
Certainly, yeah.
And that was my only question and comment for you, Shannon. So thank you. I do want to thank our staff and our consultant team for an incredible amount of work. This document I thought was just fantastic. Some of my little nitpicking notwithstanding. So thank you for that. So thank you for that. I want to acknowledge our vice chair's comment that we should try to be a leader. We should try to be aspirational. And I do have a list of recommendations that, as a result of my phone call with Miss Mallory, I was able to get my thoughts together finally. So when the time is right, Chair, we'll present our recommendations to the City Council. So I think it is appropriate that we do that tonight. I do want to address my one big concern, and with this, I think some of the other issues will be covered in various other plans and such. But I'm still very much in favor of accelerating the electrification of buildings. And I know that staff is not in favor of that because they have a belief that residents would need access to natural gas during times of electrical failures. However, and this is called a REACH code, and many other cities in California have already adopted REACH codes that ban and prohibit natural gas hookups in new construction. And I actually looked at some of the codes, and I have an example here from the Peninsula Clean Energy, Silicon Valley Clean Energy, and East Bay Community Energy, where they present the text for a REACH code. So it's already been done. It's already been adapted. Even Ojai, there was an article in today's Ventura County Star where they adopted a REACH code, and they are much colder and much warmer than we are here in Oxnard. So it's kind of like, well, if they can do it, why can't we do it? And I think that's in one of the things I had printed out for the Planning Commission was a list of vulnerable communities here in Oxnard, and we're in the bottom half of every indicator. So we should try to do what we can to reduce the impact, especially of indoor pollution, which is that's generated by the combustion of natural gas. So I think that outweighs the perhaps temporary inconvenience of not having gas during an electrical outage. So we can debate that, but I just think it's very important that we go in that direction, because one of the things with this climate action and adaptation plan is we review it every 5 years. So if we wait 5 years to deal with the decarbonization of buildings, we're already behind the eight ball when we've lost a lot of golden opportunities to implement a REACH code. So I think that will conclude my comments for right now. And one thing I do want to give a shout out to Chris Toll and Clay Downing, Jim Danza, Nicole Colazzo, Michael Chiacos, and Isadora Noguera, who were our letter writers, and their letters were just absolutely stunning. It was obvious that they put a lot of time and effort into writing comment letters to the consultants and the planning staff and the planning commission. So I want to give a huge shout out to them and just express my deepest appreciation. So that concludes my statements for right now. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Commissioner Nash. Any additional questions or comments? Commissioner Meyer. Go ahead. I'll make them after.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, so let's see. In response to your question, Ms. Mallory, I think items 10 and 11 would represent the tone that I would support in terms of creating that sense of urgency in the language that we're using in certain areas from Mr. Danza.
Thank you. Very, very helpful to work from that. We have that. Thank you for that, Commissioner Meyer.
And I'm curious, in terms of talking about water, can it be noted that our communities have and currently are dealing with severe water restrictions due to the existing crisis around water supplies and climate change in relation to that?
So if I'm understanding, Commissioner Meyer, what you're recommending is adding in some language that acknowledges the current climate, water, the water reductions and the ways that we're having to deal with the water shortage now, and adding just some language on that. Is that accurate?
Yeah, referencing it as, for example, we have over these many junctures and are currently experiencing severe water restrictions due in part to climate change. Yes, and I was curious about is rainwater harvesting and like rain gutter systems part of some of the thinking in terms of the strategies? I was surprised when I purchased a house 7 years ago in River Park that they didn't come with rain gutters. It was just something you'd have to do on your own, and it wasn't even offered as an option. And I thought, well, I'm used to having rain gutters on homes, and to be able to have that feasible to where people could have rain gutters put onto their living arrangements and have rainwater harvesting mechanisms, whatever the technology is that's best for that, I think is a key piece of us making the most of the rainwater that we do get.
Commissioner Meyer and Chair, I'm just searched with Shannon. I did not see any reference to rainwater harvesting as any option or discussion, but certainly that could, we're noting these things. That could be some language that is potentially added, but ESA team, I don't know if you have any additional thoughts on that.
No, I agree. I'm looking at our strategies now under extreme drought. We have expand and protect the city's diversity of water supply, expand community water recycling programs, use drought under ED3, use drought tolerant native plants and alternative irrigation. I think we can expand ED3 to cover some of those ideas that you just mentioned. Those are great ideas.
Great, thank you. One thing I was curious about was water, the recharging of our aquifers. And I don't know what happens in various parts of our city in terms of when we have rains, like, to the farmlands, it's kind of naturally built in. And so they they recharge naturally or not? And do we have like a proactive plan for, redirecting water flows during rains and other things towards recharging? Like knowing in River Park, there's the river on the one side and there's two large old mining pits. But I don't know if those really have any functional use other than possibly diverting floodwaters.
The Public Works team, I'm not sure, Michael, if you have any thoughts, or Steve, on recharge aquifers, redirecting water in the event of a rainstorm to take advantage of that.
So this is Michael, Director of Public Works. I think the first part of the question was groundwater recharge, and we do have a great program as part of our AWPF, and we're working on a aquifer storage recovery system. So we do have a long range plan for the city of Oxnard for groundwater recharge. That is not the natural percolation process where we would inject water. So there's a long-term plan for our city to do that as a way to recharge the basin. So that's part of that first question. The second part of the question, or second part of the comment, was about sort of stormwater capture. We've gone through that process, meaning a very high level of review of it. It's a very technical process. Involves a lot of infrastructure improvements, and quite frankly, would require us to change quite a bit of what we're doing at the wastewater treatment plant. But certainly, long range is something that we should be and are looking at from a large range or large scale component. So I hope that addresses.
Yes, thank you. Let's see, I think lastly, we're just I'd echo Commissioner Nash's suggestions around the natural gas, wondering if there's like a middle road of a planned phase out of natural gas usage in homes. I mean, I only became aware of it recently that it's a significant source of internal pollution in living spaces, and that recommendations are often to put on a vent, if you fortunately have a vent, over your stove if you're using natural gas, to minimize the impact of that internal pollution. But I'm curious, but what about something where we have something as a phase out plan, if not immediate, then something to look forward to as we're talking about it being kind of well, this might be a redundant system in case of emergency, but long-term, we don't want to have that be our future either.
If Commissioner Meyer, the chair, if that's something the commission wants to put as a recommendation, the language that you would recommend would be helpful. And again, as I stated at the beginning of the presentation, your recommendations, we would recommend that they get attached to the resolution and they would then be carried forward to council. And we've been, when the time is right, I've been taking notes, our team has been taking notes, and we certainly can summarize what we've heard.
If briefly, if I can add one clarification as well. Tonight is a study session, so we're having the dialogue, but we cannot take a vote tonight on inclusion of these items as part of it. But we can clearly have the list, and then at our next meeting, we can go over the commission, of course, would go over the particular items, and to the consent there, to the extent there's a consensus on any of the items, and those would go forward. So, but this is where we gather the ideas, we get feedback. And then those would be incorporated at our next meeting.
Thank you, Council. My last comment was about on the resilience piece. I'm wondering, is there a place and an opportunity to talk about emergency disaster planning for individuals, families, and even communities or personal networks? In the case of a disaster that causes power to be out for several days, how many residents actually have a plan for what they're going to do to have water, to have access to necessary power? So I'm wondering, is that something that's in the mix of resilience solutions for residents to explore, to see about having some like educational supports for that, on some of the how to create a network of people that can piece together the necessary need, items to survive or to make it through.
First, Commissioner Shannon, I'm not sure if you want to respond to that. If you quickly have, I was doing a quick search in terms of natural disasters. I know we did have extensive conversations with our EOC person on that.
Yeah, in fact, we felt it was so important that we made it the first strategy in the CAP in chapter 4 under climate adaptation. The need to develop public education campaign. And that could be done in any number of ways. Some cities hold like annual hazard preparedness, events where they bring all the people to the fair, to the event, and have all sorts of, emergency preparedness and information and things to gather to be prepared. I feel like this is becoming more and more important. The community, a lot of people are struggling and they're mentally anxious about this. And so we made this the first strategy to make sure that the public is informed, that they know how to prepare and that they are prepared for the next natural disaster. So we're happy to expand on that strategy if you have additional ideas, but we agree that it's important.
Oh, wonderful. Thank you, Shannon. What pages am I looking at for that?
So that's on page 4-9 of the CAP, and it's CP1, develop public education campaign to inform community of climate hazards and impacts. And then we have, all of the other ones under community preparedness are designed to make sure the community is prepared. There's early warning systems, backup power systems, expanding community resilience services and infrastructure. So definitely, it's first and foremost probably the most important, that people understand what the harms are, what resources are available to them, and what gaps the city's working on to make sure they're prepared.
Wonderful. Thank you for pointing that out. That looks great. Thank you. No further questions for now.
Thank you. Any additional questions or comments? Commissioner Connolly.
So in the chapter on implementation, the chart 5.1 that has recommendations for households and businesses, it's a good recommendation chart. It only has the approximate savings. It doesn't have any kind of indication for approximate cost. And I know it's really hard to gauge because prices change and windows are different sizes. I totally understand that. But then on 5.6, there's this very vague statement that says adopt or update ordinances and codes. And it's literally like 2 sentences. So by doing so, and by having that vague statement, I wonder if that would be a barrier to entry for people that want to have businesses in the city of Oxnard or own homes in the city of Oxnard, just because it's such a broad statement. And it kind of piggybacks on what Commissioner Nash was saying about eliminating gas for households. My question, it may be a public works question. I know that building codes are grandfathered in by the age of the house. So would that kind of change that Commissioner Meyer, my apologies, that Commissioner Meyer proposed? Would that fall into those grandfathered building codes? If say a business, a building that a business was in was built in 1956, would then it not have to have these same stringent codes, or would then that building have to be updated to meet the requirements?
Commissioner Conley, first, if bear with me, thank you. You're mentioning table 5-6. Do you have a page number?
My apologies. I mentioned table 5-1 and then on page 5-6.
Okay.
Under implementation and monitoring.
Okay.
Adapter update.
Great. Thank you. Okay. So I'm just, as I mentioned, thank you for your patience. It is a very meaty and long document. So, so the improvements that are, as you know, the improvements that are required vary based upon the age of the structure. So you're mentioning that there's no cost identified in table 5.1 because we recognize that'll be difficult to cost out. Can you point me to under the develop and refine cost estimates? That's a bullet item, and I'm hearing you have some expressed concerns regarding the cost and the impacts to the development community for adopting ordinances and codes. Do I have that correct?
Yeah, that's correct.
Okay. So that on that page, that is the the third bullet down on that page, adopt or update ordinances and codes. Some actions may represent a continuation of a recently enacted ordinance, while others would require new ordinances. Codes and ordinances often incorporate state regulations that may be updated without requiring city council approval. So many of these are just, for example, the building code, as you mentioned, I mean, we have no requirement, we have no ability to not update it. We're on a certain update cycle. So I'm trying to understand how I can, yes, there will be a cost. Yes, when certain projects that hit a certain threshold come in, when it's tipped, yes, they would have to upgrade whatever components meet that threshold. So inevitably, some of these existing actions will be costly, and they, by the nature of the age of our stock in the city. I'm happy to continue having a dialogue. I think that's where I'll stop right now and see if I can answer any further, or if there's any more clarification you want to add.
No further clarification. It just was a little vague in how, like I said, if this is going to be a barrier to entry to homeownership or to starting a business here because of the additional costs to then upgrade a building or a structure to meet these qualifications. And I mean, we have our Henry T Historic District, that some updates are just not feasible to do in that district, and they have their own group that's protected that. And yeah, there's just building codes that were from a long time ago that are still grandfathered into those properties. And I was just wondering what would supersede, if this documentation would then supersede, or if the building codes that a structure was built in that they've been grandfathered into would supersede.
So the city certainly could go beyond what the code requires. And that would then need to be promoted on our building website. And yes, going beyond what is the typical building code does add costs. So that all that does increase the barrier to build, renovate, if you're going beyond what is the standard and the expectation. Your contractor knows, your builder knows, your home improvement person, this is the standard. To go beyond it, yes, it does add cost potentially to the renovation. That is the case.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any additional questions or comments? Okay, so I just have a few, and this is going to sound like I'm jumping around all over the place. But the first one I want to actually touch on is the electric vehicle stations. And now in this, I apologize, I lost what page. I was jumping back and forth in the cap plan for electric vehicles and everything else I'm speaking. So let me just go ahead and briefly talk about it. I'm curious in regards to the rollout plan for trying to implement public charging stations. I'm aware that I believe I saw somewhere it says that it's going to be about 56 charging stations. I might have that number incorrect. Recently, I saw in the city of Ventura that they had vehicle charging stations that it was really unique. I believe it's not hooked up to the grid. It looks like a giant umbrella, but it's a solar panel that's charging into the actual charging station. So I'm wondering, when we're looking, and I guess this is too forward thinking into the future, but are we looking at the types of charging stations we're trying to implement, whether they're on the grid, whether they're solar, or some type of other form of charging station?
Chair Chavez, that's a great question. And I love those because they're so compact and I mean, why not, right? You have solar, if depending upon the type of charging station it is and the wattage, if it's a quick charge, if it's depending upon in totality on the type of charger. Yes, that the EV master plan can include those recommendations.
Okay. I'm also looking, and I've shared with the commission before. I sit on the county's climate emergency council. We had created tax, and I was on the transportation tax, and we did look at electric vehicles and the way to implement them. How many light pole structures throughout the city are the city's responsibility versus Edison? Because I'm thinking that in LA County and the San Fernando Valley in particular, they have charging stations for electric vehicles that are attached to the actual pole. And a person just comes up. I don't even know. Do they pay? I have no idea. They pay. And then they plug in, they charge, and then they're done. What is the feasibility of us being able to do something like that so that we're able to put more than actually carving out parking spaces in parking lots?
Couple of things on that. Certainly I can provide some input, and if Michael wants to add anything, certainly you have right of way and liability issues on that. So those would be things that would need to be considered. Our team has the inventory of streetlights that are owned by the city versus Edison, so we keep track of that. Certainly as part of the EV master plan, we could be looking at all those, but it's not just plug and play. You know, if it's right away, it's not as easy as just putting it in right there. There are a number of considerations, including interference of electromagnetic or energy. Michael, did you want to, or Steve, did you want to add anything else on that?
I would add one more thing, which is the type of voltage that's actually going to our city-owned streetlights. Maybe not as the same as Edison, just because most of our lights are the decorative lighting, and there may not be as robust in need of voltage and wattage. So that would be other restrictions, but those certainly are options going forward with all those potential hurdles to look at.
Okay. And Mr. Wolf, since we have you here, and I don't know, Ms. Mallory, if this is for Mr. Wolf or if this is for somebody else, but in regards to the city fleet, I know that it was mentioned that city fleet going to more energy efficient types of vehicles. How does that work in regards to the city program where we are purchasing or rotating our vehicles out every so often?
Yes, this is Jose Arreola. Hello, everyone. Fleet manager. Just want to make sure you can hear me.
Yes, thank you.
Okay. Yeah, so we have the enterprise fleet program right now that we can implement EV vehicles easily. It's just having the infrastructure and the charging stations to do so. You know, we at this point, if we had charging stations, we could implement them today. So it's just a matter of having the infrastructure and the charging stations available.
Mr. Aurelio, in regards to the vehicles, are you responsible for the purchasing or acquiring all the vehicles for every single department throughout the entire city, including fire and police? Or are you only responsible for certain departments and police and fire are responsible for their vehicles?
At this time, police is doing their own, but we do assist fire in some of their purchases. But every other department falls under fleet other than police.
Now, in the event that, say, tomorrow morning we woke up and there was charging stations throughout the entire city, how much of our fleet could be switched over that won't, I guess, impact our efficiency to be able to do the work on behalf of the residents of Oxnard?
So some of the fleet that's available right now is very limited as far as like service body trucks and stuff like that. Sedans are readily available. Unfortunately, with all the delays in production and all the, I mean, it's taking a long time to get vehicles, but there is certain manufacturers that do accommodate for some of the vehicles that we use. It comes at a high cost, though. It's the only downfall, but some of that gets absorbed because you are not paying the high fuel costs. So, you know, it's kind of you exchange the price of the vehicle for the fuel that you're paying.
Okay, I appreciate that. Thank you. I want to jump into in regards to our water storage. I know when we're trying to look at conserving water, that's what we're in right now. Once again, California is in a drought, and we're putting more restrictions on our residents. I'm wondering, I guess ultimately, if someone from Public Works, walk me through the process when the wastewater goes to the plant and is treated. What happens to that treated water afterwards?
I can take part of that question. This is Michael again. So after it leaves the wastewater treatment plants, there's two options for that water. One is to go into the outfall, which is in the ocean. That's permitted for that process. The other option is to go into our advanced water purification facility, or AWPF. If it goes into our AWPF, it goes through a treatment process that is able to produce what we call recycled water. And that water, there's no storage for AWPF. So as you probably noticed, there's no above ground large storage tanks in Oxnard anywhere. So we don't have any water storage. So we produce that water typically when there's a demand. And right now, we actually do have a demand, and that's some of our commercial farmers. And so when that water goes, and the wastewater goes to AWPF, gets treated, it gets directly distributed to a customer who then uses that water for, right now, currently irrigating some of their product. Does that answer the question?
So just for clarification, Director Wolf, after the treatment through the wastewater, is it potable, drinkable, or is it not?
It is not drinkable. It's not potable water. It's called recycled water. So it's not permitted to be consumed directly, which we would call direct potable water use. It's not permitted for that. It's not.
Okay, I appreciate that. Thank you. Public comment number 23 in attachment D. It talks about improved transit effectiveness and accessibility should include municipal measures for transit for employees and city events where public transportation is provided or recommended, and that events should encourage or incentivize walking or bicycle riding to events. Now, as a transit guy, I like that comment. That's a great comment. I'm wondering, in order to cut down VMT, is the city, or could the city take steps to incentivize our employees to take public transit to get to work or to get home through monthly passes? And as well as any events that the city puts on, could we incentivize people to take public transit and promote public transit routes that go through those events?
Chair, a couple of things. One, we do work with the transit agency for those public events, and we all know that, like the Strawberry Festival, we do promote and participate with Gold Coast Transit and VCTC on that. Our current ordinance, Oxnard City Code, does establish, it's called a Transportation Demand Management Program, and it does require a management plan for employers over a certain size. So, and things that they're required to submit a plan as part of their condition of approval process. And it identifies, for example, different options like bus passes, things of that nature. So we are doing that for certain size employers. I'd need to bring up the code section to tell you what size employer that is right now, if you have that question. But again, then the other item is you're asking, could we promote it with our employees? It would be a revision to the ordinance. Certainly anything's possible. But again, I want to go back to as when we bring forward the VMT study session before the Planning Commission, the most effective mitigations, bicycling, pedestrian, transit networks, and network improvements in mix of land use types and affordable housing near places of work. So again, this is one piece of a larger, I mean, we're going to be talking a ton about this as part of the 2050 Oxnard General Plan and consideration of land uses.
And I appreciate that, and I completely understand that. I guess it kind of segues into my next idea, and it was brought up in regards to the corridor, and you mentioned it, the 101 down to what, Channel Islands or 5 Points, maybe a little further down. And it was also mentioned in one of the comments from the public in regards to dedicated bus lanes, right-of-ways, opportunities for buses to move faster. The first thought of my mind is BRT, Bus Rapid Transit, that would be able to have its own dedicated lane. LA County does this a lot, where they create a bus lane, a vehicle lane, and then they have the sidewalks. Have we explored or looked in those types of options of potentially utilizing them in our major corridors, such as Oxnard Saviors, Ventura, Victoria, Rose Avenue?
Commissioner Chavez, the Sustainable Transportation Plan is, and Michael, I'll turn it over, or Steve, if you want to add anything else, but I know that with this, the Sustainable Transportation Plan, we're looking at a variety of options, and to have an established bus lane is a big, it's not just restripe and you're good to go. It's a huge consideration. But what the city is looking holistically at ways to get people out of their cars, how to improve safety. So does it specifically talk about transit and having that as, evaluating that as an option and as a strategy? I don't know off the top of my head. I do know that as we work through that grant and establishing those recommendations, everything is on the table. So those considerations would be what would be developed. And I believe I think the document is, I know there's been public meetings. Maybe some of the commissioners have gone to those. I do believe that will be coming forward to the commission. Michael, I'm not sure if you want to add anything else on the STP grant.
I do not have anything more to add. Thank you.
Ms. Mallory, in addition to the TDA funds that our city receives and then they automatically get passed through to Gold Coast to provide the transit service, has the city looked in other ways to support public transit financially with other resources in order to try to get those headway times down?
So have we looked at other options? I'm not sure what other financial options that we've looked at to get the headways down. I do know from a land use perspective that we are encouraging housing along that transit, and then it's a supply and demand issue. And I do know that as we have development projects, we work extensively with key leadership at Gold Coast Transit and BCTC to take those into consideration.
Okay. Comment number 41, it talks about recommended that new measure to require that lessees of city-owned property use 100% renewable generated electricity if available. The response to that comment was that it's a policy consideration. Is it within our scope to try to push for something like that, that any person that's utilizing city-owned property or in an agreement with the city to utilize said property transition to 100% or at least 80% be electrified, not electrified, but be energy efficient?
The commission can certainly include that as a recommendation, certainly.
Okay. And then it was mentioned in regards to public comment number 48. Can you just clarify what it meant in regards to creating a task force? I know Mr. Downing, he's our liaison for the CEC on the county. Is this comment, did I interpret the comment correctly of saying that it wants to create a CEC for the city of Oxnard?
Commissioner Chair, if you can give me one moment. The comment 48 regarding the CAP implementation, Chapter 5, a task force. The document will be updated to include this recommendation. I believe that he's speaking to having a lead department in each department, which we do have on that table. And there's a lot to this, so thank you. Interdepartmental, designated climate manager, implementation. The reason I'm pausing is because Clay and I talk, and we've talked about creating a regional collaborative with Santa Barbara County as well, because of the shared resources and power and numbers, things of that nature. So I think it's intended to be, the document is intended to have more of the green team. We used to have a group that would meet monthly or quarterly to come up with an advanced recommendations. That's what I believe the recommendation is, to do it in that fashion. However, in practice, we've been also pushing, as I mentioned, for collaboration with energy leaders and managers in different counties as well, and key cities as well. I hope that answers your question.
So this is not trying to create another CAG that
No.
would oversee the CAP implementation.
No, it's intended to just make it that we think it's a good idea that we formally recognize our green team, and we had it for years. So that's the thought on that response.
Okay. Now, I just want to talk real quickly on, I know solar panels isn't supposed to be in effect until another year or two for new developments, but I'm wondering that, is it possible for our city to change our ordinances, that any new or redeveloped multifamily housing units that are over a certain number have solar panels on top, and that any parking lots with 50 or more spaces have solar panels with the battery storage?
These are all options that are within the consideration of the commission. You can certainly include that within a recommendation to your resolution. And again, some of these, I would just caution the very large, energy code, building code. Some of these are maybe required already. So, and you did note that, Chair, but there may be, we just want to avoid any conflict with, for example, if it's one battery storage or a certain sizing if the building code is more restrictive, that would prevail. But all of this is within the purview of the commission.
Okay. And then that will lead into my last comments. And I know it was discussed up here in regards to electrifying our buildings. The Commissioner Nash, one of the council members on the CEC for the county, Councilmember White, is a resident of Ojai. Him and a group actually pushed for the REACH program to be in there. And now they're in that process. On this particular issue, I side with our staff on not just going forward and just going wild with it. Now, here are my concerns with that. We had a presentation at the CEC where a presenter came in and talked about the benefits of going all electric. But when I question in regards to, well, what are the downfalls, the shortfalls? Because there's those issues. Well, we don't have data on that yet, even though it's already been in part 3, 4, 5 years in certain cities already. My concern is that these new types of developments tend to be in those disadvantaged communities a lot more than those that are more wealthier. I feel we send the wrong message, and that's why I would suggest more solar panels with a battery storage that would be able to still continue to power if our grid was to go down. And in California, our grid goes down quite often with our energy consumption, especially when it's hot. That's when we get all those flex alerts. So that would be my only concern. And I shared that at the CEC, and I'm sharing that here, is that I don't believe a full-on electrification is the right approach. Maybe further down the line, as staff has made mention, down the line, once technology becomes a little bit more efficient, reliable, then maybe we can look at it. Don't get me wrong, Commissioner Nash, I understand you 100% that every 5 years reviewing this, we could be behind the curve. But at the same time, we don't want to recommend policies that are going to hurt the people that we're saying that we want to protect. So those would be my comments and questions on that. Is there any additional comments or questions? Commissioner Nash.
I do have one question for Ms. Mallory. And I don't want to step on our vice chair's toes here, but in an earlier discussion about asking the city council to devote a portion of whether it's the general fund budget or is Measure E the property tax? I believe it is. What is the property tax, council?
Measure E is a sales tax. The Carmen override is a property tax that helps pay for the pensions of public safety.
So wherever we
sorry,
ask the money to be diverted from, what amount would you be comfortable with as far as implementing the policies of the climate action and adaptation plan? Do you, just off the top of your head, do you have any idea? I mean, just round figures like 1 million, 5 million.
I'm not good in Vegas, and I'm really not good at estimating this. And that's one of the recommendations of the fiscal analysis. I can't give you a number. Sorry,
Here's your
Commissioner.
chance.
I'm so sorry. I can't.
Okay, well, that's something that the commission can wrestle with and come up with, because I do think that's an appropriate recommendation to make to the city council, especially if we ask them to tap the sales tax revenue. So, and that's quite a bit. That's whatever that is. I think it's in excess of $20 million a year. So, if we ask for whatever. As far as the property, not the sales tax. Did I say property tax?
Yeah.
Sales tax.
Okay.
I apologize. Not property tax. I misspoke. So that was my one question, and thank you.
Okay. Any additional questions or comments? So we'll go ahead and open the public hearing for this item. And Commissioner Secretary, just to confirm, we did not have anyone sign up?
Yes, we do. We have Alexis Rizzo sign up, and he's on the waiting room.
Okay, so we'll go ahead and go to him for 3 minutes. Her. Alexis.
Can you all hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
All right. Hello, my name's Alexis. I'm a policy associate speaking on behalf of Community Environmental Council, a local nonprofit. Community Environmental Council serves the tri-counties of Ventura, Santa Barbara, and San Luis Obispo. And we were established in 1970, and our mission is to promote on-the-ground momentum to reverse the threat of the climate crisis. I just want to thank the Planning Commission for holding this meeting and reviewing the city's climate action plan, and for asking all those really important questions, as well as city staff for all their hard work and time in developing this great plan. Community Environmental Council believes that the CAP is an important opportunity for the city to display leadership in adopting equitable, bold measures to reduce and mitigate greenhouse gas emissions and to build resilience in the city, especially in communities that have been and will be most burdened by climate change. Community Environmental Council supports strong, ambitious policies that not only mitigate and limit climate change impacts throughout the city, but also protect our most vulnerable frontline communities, and that these communities will benefit first and foremost from climate action. As you may know, the city ranks in the top 20% of the most environmentally burdened communities in the state, with some parts ranking within the top 10%, according to the California Environmental Protection Agency. And given the historical and present context of the city and the future threats of climate change, we encourage the city to, and some of these efforts have been talked about thus far in this meeting, so I do apologize for the redundancy. But to set a more ambitious greenhouse gas emission target and stronger greenhouse gas reduction goals, such as 50 to 60% reductions by 2030 and a carbon neutrality by 2035 goal. Start action now on near-term strategies of an electric vehicle action plan, as well as an all-electric building ordinance for new constructions like the cities of Ojai and Santa Barbara, and the one that's being developed currently at the County of Ventura. And CPA is preparing for building electrification, technical and financial assistance as well for their member jurisdictions. And lastly, clearly define Oxnard as an underserved city and clearly identify its environmental justice communities. Oxnard should also clearly define its engagement processes and resilience and adaptation strategies in accessible manner to ensure equitable participation and access for all community members, so that it is continued throughout the implementation of the policies and programs that are outlined in the CAP. That was all. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Rizzo, for your comments. Madam Secretary, did we have any other speakers?
We have a couple in the room, but they don't have their hand raised. So I'm not sure if they want to speak on this item.
Okay, so if any member that's on the call, if you wish to speak on this item, if you're dial-in only, you can press *9 to raise your hand. And if you're using the Zoom desktop app, you can use the raise hand feature. Oh,
Okay, Martha Brown says she does not wish to speak.
okay. So then we'll go ahead and close the public comments for this item and bring it back to the commission for any additional comments or questions. I'm sorry, I have one question and I forgot to ask it in regards to air pollution. This was on slide number 11, and I'm on page 4-24 of the actual CAP plan. Let me get to that real quick. I'm curious in regards to what we're doing for our air quality. The Port of Hueneme has sensors in South Oxnard, particularly along Cuesta del Mar, that demonstrates that it's a lot during the colder parts of the day, so late nights, early mornings, the air quality tends to be very poor. And they're determining that it is coming from the 101 down to the South Oxnard. Does the CAP plan take that into consideration and any mitigations for us to try to correct that in regards to, I'm not even sure what we could do as far as barriers go for the 101 since they already have the sound barriers?
So, Chair, I'm just trying to capture your question. There was reference to page 4-24 and a question regarding what we're doing to address air quality. So that page does identify a number of programs or strategies to address the issue of air quality, including implementation of the Cal OSHA rules for development for projects, ag partners, improving access to air filters. And again, some of these are programs that are required per the building code. And then we all recognize EV, as we've talked extensively about, along with vehicle miles traveled. So again, we'll be implementing improvements through the VMT program, the VMT mitigation program that will be implemented, as well as the STP recommendations, and ultimately long-term improvements through the 2050 general plan as we develop projects through that new plan.
I'm sorry, Ms. Mallory. I
Yes.
guess I'm just kind of looking at AP 5 that's on that 4-24 page. Because it does mention the older buildings. And
Right.
in South Oxnard along Cuesta del Mar, a lot of the multifamily units, they're old. They're
Yes.
very old. And I don't see them being retrofitted or updated anytime soon without the cost being passed on to the residents, where council has faced multiple times about rent increases. So
Right.
what steps?
A few things. Yes, we do not have money earmarked for this. An important thing to think of, you'll be hearing this when we bring the housing element, the amended housing element, back to the Planning Commission on August 18th. We're almost to the point of getting a certified housing element. One of the items that the HCD is working with us on is a windshield inventory survey and targeting certain areas of the city. Our housing element has a program that talks about a retrofit, and it's intended to address the issue of lower income housing, lower income units and lower income housing stock. And then there's a program in the housing element that speaks to addressing the renovation and retrofit. I'm going from memory now. I can certainly bring it up, and you'll see it in the housing element when we bring it forward. It also has some recommendations for rehab. That's what it was, rehab of some of the targeted lower income units in certain areas of the community, and as well as expanding that to moderate and above moderate. But again, it's a cost standpoint. But we will be inventorying those areas as it relates to the lower income units in targeted areas of the city. I hope that addresses your question, but yeah, this does not specifically identify money towards those homes and the need to improve the air quality through a program.
No, and I appreciate that comment. And then it also made me think about the housing units, in particular off of El Dorado and the Limerwood neighborhood, which has the farmland backed up against it, and what efforts are being taken in regards to the farming and pesticides and all of that. All right, Commissioner Meyer.
Thank you, Chair. I forgot to support that recommendation to increase our goal from the 40% to be in more line with what CEC was recommending, around 50 to 60, and that carbon neutrality by 2035. I'm thinking that relative to, from a layman's viewpoint, but relative to City of Santa Barbara and City of San Luis Obispo, I'm thinking we have already made significant strides relative to 1990 levels and 2010 levels that we can quantify, from the phasing out of the power plants, the Clean Power Alliance. And so it seems like we have, because of all of the burdens of dirty power that we have in our city, we have that much more potential, I would think, to be that much improved over our baseline. And I'm wondering, is that borne out by the data? What's the staff and the consultant opinion around, upping that and the feasibility of it?
First, I'll respond, and then Shannon or Brian, if you want to jump in. So to up that, first, I would, if that's what the commission would like to recommend, what we would need is a clear percentage and a clear target timeframe, which would So we would need that. The second is that the cap has been written with and the measures and the quantification has been written to comply with council's March directive, which is 40%, which meets the state. I'm sorry. Correct me if I'm wrong, Shannon. It has been written to comply with the state standard. And so to go back in and to exceed that, you're relooking at quantification, you're looking at new programs. It's basically a brand new cap. It's the time going back to square that percentage or that percentage and that reduction target along with measurable and quantification of those measures. Shannon, did you want to add anything, or Brian?
Brian, do you want to speak to that? That decision was made before I got on the project as far as setting the goals.
Yeah, absolutely. Hi, I'm Brian. So the local target for the cap is a 50% below 2010 levels, which is equivalent to a 40% below 1990 levels when you sort of compare to the state. And that's for 2030. As far as upping that to 60 or beyond, I think Kathleen hit it. You know, if the target was revised, we would have to look at what that additional gap would be. There may be new reduction measures that we would have to include in the cap to close that gap, or increase the performance goals, the reduction targets of measures that are in there, you know, upping the number of EV charging stations, upping the number of building retrofits and water conservation and so forth to close that gap. It's not impossible, it's just harder to do, absolutely. To the question about having the opportunity, given the city's large emitters, to reduce emissions further, I think that always is an opportunity. Stationary sources like power generation are really tricky because even though they can be located within city boundaries, like the Ormond station we talked about earlier, they are not directly part of the cap itself because they're covered by cap and trade, and they feed into Edison's overall energy generation and grid supply. So it's sort of like a jurisdictional control issue, and that is incorporated into the electricity emission factors that we use to generate emissions from electricity consumption within city boundaries. So there's a little bit of like the power plants themselves and the energy used in the city, they don't go directly together. It is absolutely consideration, and of course, reducing stationary source emissions can have all kinds of co-benefits: air quality, toxics, health risk, and development that you want in those areas. And I guess I'll leave it there.
Any additional comments or questions? Then we'll go to Ms. Mallory if she can sum up.
Chair, are we at the point where we're presenting our recommendations?
Yes, I was actually going to have Ms. Mallory list those recommendations, and if you want to add on to it, or
Yeah, I would like to add on.
okay, so we'll go to Ms. Mallory, and then we'll bring it back if there's any recommendation that wasn't listed, or if you want to add on to it. Ms. Mallory?
Okay, so I will do my best. I have 3 pages with red notes. So I think there was some items where there was clear recommendation, and there were some questions that seemed to be remaining. One of the first items, in addition to what was identified by the commissioner, a couple edits that we summarized earlier today in the presentation. In addition to those, and attachment D, that we clearly know as staff we want to make the following additional items. 1, strengthen the climate urgency as referenced in comment 10 and 11, Mr. Danza's letter, and we would then be working with the language that we currently have. So that's number 1. And we have good note taking going, so I'm going slow on this, and that's on the phone. Additionally, a question regarding the jargon and executive summary, making reference to what you can do as a community, as a member of the community, moving that content up into the executive summary. That's easy to do. We like to avoid redundancy, but we can put some information in there. That's one. That's the second item. there was a question about the icons and making areas and changes. That we would include as a third recommendation, but it would be budget dependent. We would want to talk with our consultant about what we're looking at in terms of any cost for that. And again, that certainly can be I think I'm on number 3, a third recommendation. Again, and we would work with our consultant to determine what the cost with that would be. The fourth that I heard was making mention to the water, the drought, the severe water shortage, and potentially incorporating that into an existing program, ED3. That's the fourth item that I believe we heard, as well as the concept of potentially including rainwater harvesting into some of that language or programs. I think I'm on number 4. I believe that in terms of Commissioner Orejo, where there was a question, and so this is sort of on the question side, right? Was a question regarding gray water, and Mr. Wolf, I believe, answered that question. That was one in terms of can we do anything more with that? So I put that on the question side, and I'm just going in order of comments versus yes, clear recommendations, and versus comment questions. There was a comment regarding better versus stricter limits to council as it relates to comment 62. I wanted to scroll down on that item. Okay, this pertains to the emission reduction issue. So that again is certainly a question on that one, the reduction targets. There was also the question regarding the labor peace agreement issue as it relates to VMT. That is my understanding, a third question on the question ledger side. I don't believe there was any additional under Commissioner Orejo, any additional items on yours. You asked questions, but from the conversations, I believe that we addressed most of them. Correct me if I'm wrong on that. Proceeding to Commissioner Nash, reference under page 418, a question. The fifth clear change we agree with is slide 11. Yes, I'm on that. Is the wildfire and adjusting some language, and we do have some suggested language on that, striking the language. While Oxnard is not directly threatened by wildland fires, so striking that and starting that section with regional wildfires and then proceeding. So that's, I think I didn't hear any objection to that. That's a clear recommendation.
Ms. Mallory, real quick, just before I miss this, I believe Vice Chair Orejo brought up a question about recommendation regarding budget percentage to council and your comments.
Yes, that's correct. I was going to follow up with some of my options. I guess I can say it now that I was looking at either percentage of some type of the budget or a actual dollar amount, but that's what I'm looking at in my head right now. I was planning to follow up after this meeting with something a little bit more detailed. So
okay, just want to be sure. I thought I heard it, and I'm glad I heard it correctly. So.
Thank you, Mr. Almeidas and Commissioner Orejo. So I've added that as one of the items as a question, and I appreciate the clarification. There's a lot to all this. Continue on, Commissioner Nash. The questions I think we've talked through in terms of the 2 emails. There was a comment about trying to be aspirational, and I'm hopeful that the addition of text under in our response to comment 10 and 11 on attachment D gets us there with the aspirational. Although I do recognize that there's a question on the reduction targets, which may align with your aspirational question.
I will have some additional recommendations. So after you're
Sure.
finished, thank
Just,
you.
and I'm glad we're doing this, and I'm happy to talk through those. Going to Commissioner Myers, a number of questions regarding aquifer recharge, redirecting water. I believe Mr. Wolf did an excellent job of responding on those, and I don't see any change on that. There was a question, again, I think this goes to middle of the road, a phase out approach on the issue of electrification, that it seems to be on the question side as well still. I believe we addressed the resilience question as well in terms of the cap, and that we do have that emergency planning component. We then still continue to have the question on, is that a 40 or 50% reduction target? We did talk about that in terms of the revisions needed to the cap to, should we go that direction. Continuing to Commissioner Chair Chavez's question, there was a question on EV. The transit pass, and this is on the question side, the issue regarding the VMT and potentially how to promote transit and in alignment with the idea of VMT, ways to improve VMT. So on the question side, for sure. There's also a question as it relates to attachment D question or response 41 regarding 100% renewables on city-owned property. That's on the question side. And then a question, I had this as sort of a question, solar panels with new development or redevelopment based upon, or solar and or battery dependent upon type of development or size of square footage. That's on the question side. I believe I captured all of them. I was numbering them and I lost that number, but
I think we got lost after 3. Thank you, Ms. Mallory, for that recap, and we'll go to Commissioner Nash.
Thank you, Chair Chavez. So I do have some additional recommendations and some clarification on other. As far as the REACH code, I'm still in favor of that, but I would also accept exclusions for restaurants and food preparation facilities, and this would only be for new construction.
may I ask a question? Sorry, I
Yes.
just make sure in the interest of getting this accurate. So new construction,
Only for new construction with exclusions for restaurants and food preparation facilities.
okay, I have that.
That staff continues to find ways to reduce vehicle miles traveled, and that's already been taken care of, I think. That staff continues to expand partnerships with the CPA and other renewable energy providers. I think that's taken care of. That staff find funding to provide EV chargers for handicap parking spaces, and I assume that'll be taken care of. That all municipal vehicles be all electric and V2G capable. And the vehicle I was thinking of was the Ford, I think it's the F-100. They have an all-electric model that has that capability. That vulnerable populations have access to battery storage during emergencies. That city code be changed to ban decorative turf in new developments and implement xeriscaping wherever feasible. That would fall under drought, of course. And because tree canopy is so vital to reducing the heat island effect, and the fact that Oxnard is in the bottom 17%, if I read that correctly, that we allow curb cuts adjacent to city-owned trees planted in parking strips to allow them to access gutter runoff. And I would just come up with a figure, Vice Chair, of, I was thinking a million, but I was thinking maybe 1.5 million from the additional sales tax measure would be, a starting point to implement the policies of the climate action and adaptation plan, especially in regards to building out EV chargers and solar and battery systems for vulnerable communities.
Yeah, Commissioner Nash, I'm not opposed to that. Obviously, I'll take the next couple of weeks to do a little bit research, depending on, I'm looking at size of the city and what is contained in Oxnard versus others. But yes, definitely not opposed. And thank you for offering a number up just to start off with.
And that concludes my recommendations. Thank you, Chair. And thank you, Ms. Mallory.
Ms. Mallory.
Thank you, Chair. Commissioner Nash, some of the items we need just a bit of clarification on. Some of them were things I believe we are doing, and we responded that are not sort of recommendations. I wanted to make sure that from your list, which was a very good and comprehensive list, that I understand what feeds into a recommendation to go with the resolution and an edit to a recommended edit to the cap. So those clear recommendations on where to edit, and then where there are questions. So thus far, I know for sure one of the questions that we need to talk about is that dollar amount for the cap. Can you, with your recommendations, can you parse them out between text recommendations, edits versus the recommendations that we need to talk about as a commission? Does that make sense?
Okay, now you want me to go over the edits that you suggested that I presented earlier and you presented just now, that I'm good with those edits.
Thank you, Commissioner. I definitely heard that. There was added items like funding for EV handicap. I believe we responded to that, but I didn't know if you were looking for additional edits.
No, I think that we covered that in our
Okay.
phone
Got
conversation.
it.
So,
Okay, thank you.
yeah, thank you.
So from what I heard, the two items that are resonating for a discussion from the commission pertains to the reach code issue and then the funding for the cap and implementation. From your list, are those the two that you are identifying as two recommendations that need to be discussed?
I suppose I'm comfortable with that because everything else will be, wrapped up in the climate action plan. So, but I do think we should present a dollar amount to the city council just so that they have something to work with.
Would it be useful for me, Commission Chair, to summarize what I believe are the outstanding questions? Would this be helpful?
Go ahead, Ms. Mallory.
Okay, so the first on the gray water, I wanted to make sure that we cover that first. I know Mr. Wolf has some deadlines on his end. So is there a question there on should we include policies to address gray water? So that's the first question for the commission.
I believe that came from my comments. It was more that to recommend that the city or to encourage private companies to publicize that they are using gray water. So I guess no, we don't have to discuss that at the next. But I guess that would be a generalized comment. I would appreciate if it be included somehow in addition to others.
Thank you for that, Commissioner Orejo. Mr. Wolf, do you have any questions or is that allowed? Is that by any code requirements? Is that something? Turning it over to you.
Yeah, so just again, the term gray water is being used, so that's a building and safety item. And so making private property owners advertise that they're using gray water. I'm not sure how that gets effectuated. Talking about recycled water, obviously that's required to have purple pipe signs and recycled water and use signs. Those are all regulated by the state. And then if the question is whether or not we sort of quote unquote advertise that on our website, we certainly have our own water page, talk about, and we tout our AWPF. So I'm trying to figure out what the specific ask is, so I can get down to the specifics.
Mr. Wolf, I think I understand, and what the recommendation is to publicize the gray water. Would the commission be comfortable with, if allowed per building code or any required codes in the city, promote it?
Yes, thanks. That sounds great. And to his comments, I was not necessarily on a website. I was more of in the physical property. So yes, that would go with yours, Miss Mallory, what you just suggested. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Okay, so that could be, so that would be one item that commission would say, check the box. Yes, we agree with that. If allowed via code, and promote it through text and programs in the CAP. The other question item was, what is the appropriate reduction target? The third question for the commission pertains to VMT and project labor agreements and promoting VMT, promoting those agreements as a way to reduce VMT. The fourth item pertains to what is the appropriate budget or dollar amount for a CAP, for CAP implementation. And on that, I would just mention that we don't know, the fiscal analysis will be conducted. Language in the commission resolution attaching strong recommended language that the commission highly recommends, that they are, supportive of continuation of the identification and implementation of yearly CAP related monies to support measures is strongly recommended. Some sort of language of that nature. I know that doesn't necessarily address, you want a specific dollar amount, but again, my only caution is some of the sales tax money has been earmarked. It has been clearly laid out for addressing what the voters had committed to and what they voted for. But I certainly understand the urgency of getting this into action. And so perhaps some language that speaks to the strong support as a commission to incorporating these measures into the city's yearly budgeting process, including capital improvement process, would resonate, even maybe through a whereas provisions in addition of the resolution, in addition to language recommendations. That was the fourth item, I believe, was a question. Then the additional one had to deal with solar and battery requirements. And I believe that was from the chair and requiring that on certain size development projects or parking garages. I had one other item, as I believe is the final question item, and it pertains to question number 41, which I'm just scrolling up to. And that would be 100% renewable on city owned properties or buildings. I think that's the list I had. Hopefully that's thorough, but you've captured it all.
Yes, Ms. Mallory, and in regards to 41, whether it's 100% or at least above 80%, if possible. If we can't do the 100%, at least 80% renewable energy. Vice Chair.
Thank you, Chair Chavez. A question for Ms. Roselle before I go into a couple of Ms. Mallory's questions. In 2 weeks' time, are we going to be able to do any amendments to what's put before us in regards to all of the recommended changes that Ms. Mallory is aggregating for us to put into the resolution, or whatever we see in 2 weeks' time is a yes or no on all of it?
As I mentioned earlier, the commission is not making a decision on any of these individual items. So while we are getting a sense of at least what some members of the commission wish to include as part of the resolution recommending the cap, no final decisions are made tonight. So to answer your specific question, Commissioner Araujo, Ms. Mallory and her team will be bringing forward a number of possible modifications or amendments to the cap. And it is well within your ability to modify those to capture what you support, and also as part of the deliberative process, the Planning Commission may not support one position and may want to modify it slightly. So that's clearly part of your final decision-making process.
Thank you for that clarification. And actually that provided me a little bit more flexibility with what I'm about to say. And I additionally asked because there were a couple of times where we did make an amendment to the resolution and it had to be brought forward to a following meeting. I'm not sure, again, I've asked before if there's a hard deadline for the Planning Commission to approve. Do we have to do it in 2 weeks' time? Or if there happen to be significant changes, could it be brought at the following Planning Commission? Just in case, I remember when we had to remove that site, one of the phases in the River Park area, I think the motion was brought forward by Commissioner Conley. It just had to be brought forward to the next meeting.
Yeah, I think and I was just speaking with Ms. Mallory, I think a lot depends on the scope. So as an example, if we are going forward with the amount of money which the commission wants to recommend, if any, for climate action plan policies, if the number was $1 million, you want to change to 1.5 million or 0, those are all changes that could easily be made. If there was a requirement or recommendation that you modify the entire report to reflect a particular item, and that would take substantial amount of time, that could not be done on the fly. But for the kind of changes I think that likely would occur as the commission hones down some of these recommendations that Ms. Mallory and her team are putting together, that's something that as staff we'd be comfortable with doing there, and we can update the resolution and continue with the current schedule we have in place. Ms. Mallory, do you agree with that approach?
Yes, I do. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you for that, Ms. Rozelle. And now on to the questions, the clarification that Ms. Mallory requested. In regards to the target, I'm recommending right now for a 50% target to be brought to us. You know what? I changed that. A 60% target. And I guess I'll just say right now that with the possible amendments to make it lower than 60%, but I like it to be brought at 60% right now. And in regards to the dollar amount, I'd like it brought back to us at a $1 million. And I'm broadcasting again. There's a possible amendment that I'm considering of making it up to $1 million, just so that we, I'll save my arguments in 2 weeks' time. And I think that covers, at least from the comments that came from me. Thank you very much, Chair.
Commissioner Chair, if I can ask a point of clarification. One is that you're recommending a 60% target, and understanding that that if we put that in, it will require a redo of the cap, or that can be a 60% target when the city updates the cap in 5 years. So that would be a question. The second is reference to the 1 million or up to $1 million. Are you recommending that on a yearly basis as part of our budgeting on a yearly basis, the city's budget? That would be my second question.
Yes, let's start off with a yearly. Thank you for that. And in regards to the 50% target or 60%, if now or in 5 years' time, I like to start off with now, again, with a possible amendment in 5 years' time. And thank you for your comments in regards to that, for the option for the 5 years' time. Thank you.
Any additional questions? Commissioner Nash?
I just want to clarify the change in the percentage. So if we go with the 60%, is that what you're suggesting,
Okay.
Vice Chair?
Yes, Commissioner Nash, at least as a starting point for conversation.
So if I'm hearing staff correctly, that would require a major redo of the draft cap. Yeah.
Yes, Commissioner, and this, again, this is a recommendation and a resolution that would go to council. So council would look at the recommendation. They would say, do we agree with changing our targets? And if we do, okay, then we're going to go budget back. We'll budget back to the community development team. We'll reallocate the money, and you go back and you go now create the target, and you go back through the whole process again.
Okay, so until the city council approves that, if they do, then you don't have to put any more resources into the plan.
It's correct, right there. It would be a recommendation to your resolution.
Okay, thank you for that clarification.
All right. I'll just say real quick, Vice Chair, I see your point, but a couple of them do concern me in regards to our starting point. I would hate to see all of the work that our staff and our consultants did just to pretty much hit the reset button. I'm sure we can revisit it every 5 years to maybe increase if we're on a good path moving forward, and we're seeing that we're meeting targets, to maybe look at increasing it. In terms of the dollar amount, I side with staff in regards to just putting language as opposed to just putting an actual dollar amount. The concern with the dollar amount is that, as already mentioned, and we all saw publicly and on social media, passing Measure E was not an easy battle. It was very challenging. It was a lot of trust that the residents had to put into the city. And so to put a dollar amount, especially on other items that the city already said, we want to pay and address these issues, I think sends the wrong message that people can argue that now we're trying to change the rules of the game. So I would just prefer staff's language in regards to, Ms. Mallory, can you say that language again in regards to the funding sources for the cap?
The Planning Commission recommends that the city utilize the Climate Action Adaptation Plan in their yearly budgeting, including their CIP process.
Thank you. I believe that's strong language. It's clear as to what we want to accomplish. I just feel a dollar amount I just don't want to lose the trust of our residents. And I believe by us putting a dollar amount on something that wasn't part of the original deal is going to put us in a bad light. I believe that language still accomplishes what we want. And of course, council can, when it's budget time in June, they can go ahead and set whatever amount they want to put aside. But I feel hog tying our councils to saying $1 million starting every single year. That's $1 million taken away from something else in our city. Commissioner Nash.
Vice Chair, another point of clarification. When these recommendations come back to the Planning Commission in 2 weeks, will we vote on each recommendation individually, or will we have to take it as a whole?
If I may, it would be my recommendation that, given that there has not been consensus on each of these items, that the commission should vote on each of the item, either with a formal vote or by show of hands, or actually we're electronic, so we'll need to do a roll call just to ensure that there is no question where the commission stands on on each. So I think that's important because these are issues which there's a lot of passion on different sides of the issues, and we want to make sure that we reach that consensus. The Planning Commission reaches that consensus going forward.
And I agree with council's recommendation. But in light of that, could Ms. Mallory then include both versions of the budgeting for the cap? One that includes the dollar amount and one that includes, you know,
As
we hope you do something.
the process that we followed so far is that if any of the commissioners has an issue they'd like to be brought at our next meeting, then that Ms. Mallory has been adding that to the list. So to the extent that there's a desire by one or more commissioners to have an item brought back for the next meeting that's within the purview of the commission here, climate action plan, then yes, that would be appropriate. If that's the desire of one or more commissioners.
So will both funding recommendations be included in the recommendation list, and we can then the one who whichever one garners the most votes would be the one that gets passed on to the city council.
Yeah. I mean, I think yes. If that is a request, then
because I'm hearing some, I would tend to support vice chair's dollar amount, where other commissioners might support the chair's recommendation of accepting Ms. Mallory's wording.
yeah, I mean, this would clearly be either or. It would not be both.
Right.
But if there's a desire, then without giving any indication of staff support of either or.
What do the other commissioners feel about that?
Well, but once again, let's not reach consensus. I think my recommendation would be if one of the commissioners wants an item brought back for the next meeting on the climate action plan, then I would recommend that be added to the list of options. And then it's going to be a buffet where the planning commission will at the next meeting, we'll get to pick those items on the buffet that you would like to include.
Well, I do like the idea of a buffet.
So I think that's the best way to think about it. So it's options, and it's always good to have option choices, and decisions may change over time as we think about them and look at the actual language. So that would be my recommendation.
Mr. Chair, and to Commissioner Nash's comment about buffet, which I liked. The problem that we have with the buffet before you, if you will, is we don't know what those costs are associated on the menu. The financial analysis associated with the cap has not been prepared or completed. And so it's difficult for staff to come back to you and say, this is going to cost X, this is going to cost Y, and have you consider recommendations for us to take to the council when the cap is brought to the council. As you know, the council has final authority on the budget, and they have to consider many other factors that are involved in that budget, the budget that's prepared through the city manager's office. So, and we just came out of that process, as you are aware, a very in-depth process that involves all of the departments and all of the challenges before the council and this community in terms of budget priorities. So for us, I'm just speaking on behalf of our staff. We're hesitant to put dollar figures next to these implementation measures. And particularly since this is the first cap that's being adopted by the city, this initial step is expected to have that limitation for us. In future years, we may have a much better picture on what some of these initiatives are going to cost and what those impacts are to the city needed for implementation. But at this point, this is our first round in the cap. I will tell you, I have a certain level of discomfort coming back to you without a financial analysis to back up what those recommendations are from staff.
Thank you, Director Adomaitis. Commissioner Meyer.
Thank you, Chair. I guess I had a question for some maybe estimation or feasibility of the analysis that would be needed to explore 50 or 60% reductions. So when you talk about the scale of what it would take, is there a reality to having something in 2 weeks, or is that just not going to happen?
I don't think it's going to happen in 2 weeks.
It was a lot of work to go back through quantification. I mean,
Yeah.
Shannon, I know that Brian's off and he is COVID, just so you know, so he's not just signing off. But took us months to do that analysis, and it's not just, put it in, you turn it and it cranks out. And I have some concerns with bringing back the menu for the 21st, but we'll do our best. But I'm just tempering you that we may need another meeting after that. Well, we may not be able to bring it to you on the 21st, but it took months to do the quantification.
Are you asking just for a scope of work in 2 weeks? Not, I certainly think requantifying.
No, the question was quantifying, but I think we answered that. So your answer, your response says it all as well.
Gotcha. So, I mean, the question then comes to me of, what's the feasibility? What's the reality of us suggesting 50 or 60%? Is there a way for that to be built into the recommendations? And if there is, would that then mean several months of additional time that wasn't planned at this point to re-quantify if the council were to agree and say, yes, let's go for 50 or let's go for 60?
So Commissioner Meyer, Chair Chavez, the council picked the percentage back in March at a public meeting. They have not budgeted for it to go back. Our budget's been established for this coming year. This was a $480,000 contract-ish to get to where we're at. And there's no money for this. It would be going back to council. Just if council chose to do this, it would be them scratching the 480 basically. The recommendation on our end would be put it in your resolution and say, I like the idea, evaluate how we're doing. I mean, we want to be looking at those continuous targets and see how we're meeting those reduction targets, and consider a more aggressive percentage in 5 years when we update the cap to reflect the new 2050 general plan land use patterns. That would be our professional recommendation.
All right. Thank you, Ms. Mallory. Yeah, it just sounds like it's a waste of time for us to put forth anything attempting to be more stringent than that, just because it would require, if it's another $500,000 investment to reanalyze and reformulate. It just doesn't seem like that's in the books right now. But I'm open to suggestions on alternative ways to address this.
Thank you, Commissioner Meyer. And honestly, that's why I made the comments that in 5 years we could reassess. And if we're on the right path and our city's doing what's right and we're making strides that the residents are able to actually see that the city's taking those steps, then yeah, we can increase it. But again, almost $500,000, and to have it just go down the drain, that's not a good governance for our residents. That's not what they would want to see. We'll go Commissioner Connolly and then Vice Chair.
And just a quick note on that, what a great way to lead by example if those goals were met or exceeded, and the press that the city of Oxnard would receive and the press that you guys would receive would be astronomical. So it's not a cap at whatever 40%, whatever council agreed on. It's a target goal, and target goals can always be met or exceeded.
Agree. Vice Chair.
Thank you, Chair. I apologize. I didn't realize this would have this much discussion on this. Just to reiterate, I was just looking at 60% as a starting point. I was going to say my arguments in a couple of weeks, and I'll keep them for there. I just want to say first that, I mean, for sure that I acknowledge everyone's comments and it's changing my opinion, which is good for the deliberation. And we'll see what happens in 2 weeks, but I'm glad I got that information in regard to the 480. I didn't know that. I would have gotten it now or in 2 weeks. So I'm learning more information. So there's there are things I want to say, and I'll keep it in 2 weeks, and my mind can be changed, and it probably is in the process. So on all the issues, both that I brought up and that others have brought up. So thank you.
Thank you. Any final comments before we go to our staff for their final comments? Commissioner Nash.
I just want to thank my colleagues for having such a robust discussion on this matter, because this is a very, very important document. And, the sooner we can get it passed by the city council, the better. I anticipate in 5 years, there'll be a lot of changes. I'm actually very optimistic that we'll be able to meet our goals sooner, because I see so many such a widespread electrification of our transportation system. And that's really a driver of a lot of the greenhouse gases. So, let's do what we can right now. And in 5 years, no longer than 5 years, I want that to be a hard 5 years after this thing gets implemented, that we, revisit it and update some of the policies and goals. So thank you for that.
Thank you, Commissioner Meyer.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I would reiterate the comments. I know it's a big ask for us to read this and digest it. And I also want to acknowledge staff and our consultant team for taking on such a monumental task and doing so well at it. I think, we focus on, what about this? We change that, we do this, but the breadth and depth of it is really excellent. And so I think kudos to you all for putting in the work that makes, being able to have impact on this, incredible threat to all of us, something that's real and tangible. So thank you.
Thank you. Any additional comments?
Chair, I hate to be the bearer of bad news, and everyone's looking at me. So there were 3 other items that were these questions, and we certainly can bring forward what we believe is recommended language to address, but I don't believe there was consensus on this well, we're not getting consensus. Thank you, Ken. I pause that. The remaining items just is the issue of VMT and the project labor agreements and adding that in as a firm statement. Additionally, the storage and battery requirements by sizing, the building size or parking size, parking square footage size. I think that's right. And then the other was at least the city's properties at requiring renewables at 80%. So we'll propose some language. We'll include some recommendations on those and bring that back with that resolution as well for those 3 additional items. But I think we got the bulk of the discussion for those big items that we just spent a bit of time on.
I don't think that was bad news. I think that was okay news. So if there's no further final comments from the commission, we'll turn it to Ms. Mallory and Ms. Wages if there's any final comments that you want to provide. If not, then we can go ahead and end that study session.
That's all for us. Thank you. Thank you, ESA team. And thank you, Public Works team as well. Michael, Jose, and Steve, thank you so much for participating in this meeting tonight. Appreciate it so much.
Absolutely. Thank you to our city staff and our consultants, and hopefully Brian gets well very, very soon. So that will conclude that item for study sessions and reports. We'll move on to Planning Commission business. Commissioners, is there any business to bring before the commission? Commissioner Nash.
I mentioned, I think at the last meeting, the Planning Commission sending a letter to Mr. Kolwitz, offering our appreciation and thanks for his service. I don't know if staff has had the time to do anything about that.
I believe Mr. Pearson was looking into that.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, any additional business? I'll just say real quick that Friday, which is tomorrow from 9 a.m. to 2 p.m. in Santa Paula, the County of Ventura is giving away narrow leaf milkweed plants. They're free plants. Households can have up to 5 to 7 plants. And then on Friday, July 15th, the same time, it's going to be in Camarillo at the airport. All of these are on a first come, first served basis. And it's a great opportunity to try to help out our monarch butterflies. So 5 to 7 plants, first come, first serve. The first event is tomorrow, and then the second event will be next week in Camarillo. I also want to say thank you to all of my commissioners. From seeing other meetings, I have to say our meeting is very efficient and the way that it's ran, and the dialogue and the communication between all of us. So thank you for all of your guys' decorum on the dais. If there's no further business, we'll turn to our actually, I did have one question. The Oxnard School District has 2 schools that they are, I guess, proposing, but only one of them is falling under the Coastal Commission, and it has designated the city as Oxnard as the authority on them, and it's a project near Seabridge. Is that something that will come to the Planning Commission at a later date, or is that only for the City Council because of the Coastal Commission?
I can start with part of it, then the planning team can jump in as well. Before that project can go forward, there has to be a property swap. The city owns property that basically blocks them off from accessing. So there have been discussions over the years, but there's a lot of complicated issues. The city has not been the impediment in the project going forward. I'll leave it at that.
Okay.
This is also part of the development agreement, that whole area. So it's not necessarily coming before the planning commission, the permit process.
Correct. I mean, this is something which is actually allowed under the specific plan. The property exchange has to go forward, and that would actually come before the planning commission for general plan conformity before property was transferred. But it's been a long process.
Thank you. And I only asked just because I saw a report on the Oxnard School District's website naming the city of Oxnard in regards to the Coastal Commission. So I was just curious about that. And I understand those projects are long down the road. So thank you for that. We'll go to our city staff.
Ms. Mallory doesn't have anything to add. I don't have any new information other than the groundbreaking for the Navigation Center, I believe, is on July 27th. So we're excited about that as an important project for our community, and just really excited to see that come to fruition, and plenty else going on. And I hope everybody had a safe 4th of July. And I will be going on a brief vacation starting tomorrow. And Mr. Jeff Pengilly, our assistant director, will be acting. So if anybody needs any help during my absence, please call Jeff. That concludes my remarks.
Thank you, Director Adamitis. Any questions for him? Hopefully you enjoy your vacation. Remember to come back though. Since there's no further business before the commission, and if there's no objection to adjournment, we will be adjourning to our next regular meeting for Thursday, July 21st, 2022 at 6 p.m. right here in the council chambers. As always, thank you to our staff for all their hard work. Thank you to the commission. Thank you to the public for their participation. Have a great night and stay safe. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair.